Chapter 48-24. Lord Horn Constellation. The Heavenly Demon King has already left. Lord Nyo Constellation, Lady Constellation. A primordial god commander hurriedly walked forward and knelt before the Horn Constellation god. The Horn Constellation god clenched his fists tightly and roared in a low voice, "I will avenge Nyo Constellation and Lady Constellation. The next time I meet the Heavenly Demon King, I will definitely fight him with my life and kill him as a sacrifice to Nyo Constellation and Lady Constellation." Many primordial gods in Star City were moved by his words. They all bowed and cupped their hands at the Horn Constellation god to show their respect. Ma Yujie stood not far away and slowly frowned. He subconsciously looked at the building where the Horn Constellation god had fallen. He knew that the Heavenly Demon King was indeed very strong. However, the Heavenly Demon King's attack on the Horn Constellation god should not have used his full strength. Furthermore, it was weaker than Nyo Constellation and Lady Constellations. With the Horn Constellation god's strength, he naturally believed that he could not withstand it. However, after falling into the building, the Horn Constellation god only appeared after more than 10 breaths of time. This made Ma Yujie feel that something was amiss. The Horn Constellation god was very strong. The Heavenly Demon King's casual attack could not have caused him to not recover for more than 10 breaths of time. "Ma Yujie, why are you in a daze? Come to me." The Horn Constellation god's voice rang out, interrupting Ma Yujie's thoughts. Ma Yujie looked up and saw that the Horn Constellation god was already floating in the air with his hands behind his back. He was smiling at him. Ma Yujie hesitated for a moment before jumping up and following the Horn Constellation god. "I'll bring you to Seijun Constellation," the Horn Constellation god said with a smile. Ma Yujie's eyes were filled with excitement as he asked, "Really? However, didn't you say that Lord Jun Constellation's situation is tense? Does he have time to see me now? I will send other primordial gods to replace him. Let him return to Divine Star City to meet you first," the Horn Constellation god said with a smile. Ma Yujie cupped his hands at the Horn Constellation god. "Thank you, Lord Horn Constellation." The Horn Constellation god waved his hand and said rather kindly, "No need to be so polite. By the way, there's one more thing. I don't know if I should ask?" Horn Constellation god, "Please ask," Ma Yujie said. "I heard you have a companion, right? I heard Jun Su mention it before. His name seems to be Zhuoan. I wonder where he is?" The Constellation god of the Horn Constellation asked with a smile. Ma Yujie paused for a moment. He could not help but recall the scene from a moment ago. He shook his head and said, "Brother Zhuar and I were separated on our way to Sacred Star City. I don't know his exact whereabouts." Hearing this, the Constellation god of the Horn Constellation nodded. He quickly concealed the disappointment in his eyes. "That's indeed a pity. Now, follow me to Sacred Star City," the Constellation god of the Horn Constellation said calmly. Ma Yujie nodded. Then, the Constellation god of the Horn Constellation waved his sleeve. Then, he turned into a ray of light and disappeared from this place. The Star City was quickly taken over by the other Constellation gods, and they began to send god formation masters to repair the god formation. Several hours later, the Constellation god of the Horn Constellation god brought Ma Yujie to a huge and majestic Star City. This Star City was located in the center of the 18 Star Cities. Not only was it the most spacious, but the buildings inside were also arranged neatly, layer upon layer. There were also many rays of light entering and exiting the Star City. "Is this Sacred Star City?" Ma Yujie looked curiously at the majestic Star City in front of him, his heart filled with shock. He had seen too many Star Cities along the way, but none of them were as majestic as the Sacred Star City in front of him. He had to admit that the Sacred Star City lived up to its name as the core star city of the Northern Seven Constellations starfield. Its scale was far beyond that of an ordinary star city. The Constellation god of the Horn Constellation god led Ma Yujie into the Sacred Star City. They did not encounter any obstacles as they went all the way to the deepest part of the Star City. Soon, the Constellation god of the Horn Constellation god brought Ma Yujie to a stop in front of a huge circular building. This building was heavily guarded. Groups of armored primordial gods patrolled around this circular building. Constellation god of the Horn. Is he the heaven's chosen son that the chariot constellation spoke of? Suddenly, a burly man with red tattoos on his face walked out of the circular building. He greeted the constellation god of the Horn constellation god while his eyes fell on Mayujia. Mayujia frowned. This burly man's gaze made him feel very uncomfortable. It was as if he was sizing up a prey. Mayujia. This is the constellation god of the northern 7 constellations, one of the 4 paragons. The constellation god of the Horn constellation god introduced Mayujia with a smile. Mayujia nodded. He glanced at the constellation god of the Horn constellation god and did not greet him. Instead, he asked, "Where is Lord Chariot Constellation?" The constellation god of the Horn constellation god did not mind Mayujia's rudeness. He grinned and said, "Chariot Constellation is waiting for you in this building." Chariot Constellation is indeed here. The constellation god of the Horn constellation god saw that Mayujia did not believe him. He nodded at the latter and said to the constellation god of the Horn constellation god, "Constellation, let's go in together." The constellation god of the Horn constellation god shrugged and said, "I naturally have no objections." Although Mayujia was puzzled, he did not say anything. He just silently followed behind the 2 constellation gods. After entering the circular building, Mayujia found that there was a hall inside. This hall was very big, but it was rather dark. There was nothing inside. At the end of the hall, there was a spiral staircase that meandered downwards. There was a faint light leaking out from below. Mayujia did not know if it was an illusion, but he could vaguely hear some screams and the sound of whips whipping flesh. However, it was not obvious. Mayujia tried to use his divine sense to investigate, but found that there was a power in this building that blocked the divine sense. He could not use his divine sense to investigate at all. "Let's go." Chariot Constellation is at the bottom of this underground floor. The constellation god of the Horn constellation god grinned and glanced at Mayujia before walking down the stairs. Mayujia realized that the constellation god of the Horn constellation god had unknowingly landed behind him. Mayujia, follow constellation god of the Horn constellation. "I will follow behind you." The constellation god of the Horn constellation god's voice was still gentle, but it was slightly more indifferent than before. Mayujia did not think too much about it. He lifted his foot and followed the constellation god of the Horn constellation god down the spiral staircase below. As he continued to descend, Mayujia quickly arrived at the first underground floor. The moment he saw the scene of the first underground floor, he was stunned and his mouth was wide open. This was because the first underground floor was actually lined with rows of cells. Each cell was tied up with prisoners who were screaming in pain. Chapter 48-25. Lord Horned Constellation. What is the meaning of this? After coming to his senses, Mayujia turned to the Horned Constellation god with a dark gaze. The smile on the Horned Constellation god's face had long since disappeared, replaced by a cold and solemn expression. "Nothing. I kept my promise and brought you to Sijin Su." The Horned Constellation god said indifferently. "What? Lord Jinsu is in this prison? What did you do to him?" Mayujia's expression changed drastically, and his heart sank. He had never imagined that the Horned Constellation god, one of the 4 paragons, would deceive him in such a despicable manner. Zhen Su betrayed us. He clearly knew that the Heaven's Chosen One could save us primordial gods, but he hid it from us. The Horned Constellation god sneered. "That's right. Zhen Su has indeed gone too far. We asked him about the Heaven's Chosen One's whereabouts, but he still refused to tell us. Don't you think we should imprison such a traitor?" The Horned Constellation god said indifferently. Mayujia remained silent as he scanned his surroundings. He was looking for an opportunity to escape. "Don't waste your energy. You won't be able to escape. The entire prison is under our surveillance." The Horned Constellation god saw through Mayujia's thoughts at a glance. He shook his head and reached out with a withered hand to grab Mayujia. A terrifying godly power invaded Mayujia's body. He wanted to run away, but he found that his body was like a swamp. He could not move at all. He could only watch as the constellation god of the Horn constellation grabbed his neck and slammed him to the ground. Ma Yujia spat out a mouthful of blood as his divine power was restrained by a terrifying force, making it impossible for him to move. Horned constellation. Bring him to the last level of the prison. The divine transformation ritual is almost done. Bring him here when the time comes. The horned constellation god said, then turned and left without looking at Ma Yujia. Horned constellation. You bastard, you damned old bastard. Ma Yujia cursed angrily. Although he didn't know what the divine transformation ritual was, he could guess from the horned constellation god's malicious smile that it wasn't anything good. Be quiet. The constellation god threw Ma Yujia to the ground and kicked him a few more times. Every kick contained a terrifying amount of power. Ma Yujia kept spitting out blood, and only then did he stop cursing. However, his eyes were still fierce, and he stared coldly at the constellation god. As expected of heaven's chosen son, you're quite unyielding. Too bad you won't be you very soon. The constellation god grinned and carried Ma Yujia into the depths of the dungeon. Ma Yujia was in a daze, and he had no idea how long the constellation god had been carrying him. When the constellation god finally stopped, she threw Ma Yujia onto the ground. Ma Yujia groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, the constellation god slammed the door of the cell shut. Ma Yujia lay there for a long time before he recovered. He looked around and realized that he was in a pitch-black cage. The cage was surrounded by clouds of black fog, and each cloud of black fog had countless strange human faces flickering. They looked ferocious and terrifying. Suddenly, Ma Yujia's gaze fell on the opposite cage. There was a short old man squatting there. Lord Jinsu. The moment he saw the short old man, Ma Yujia immediately recognized him as the constellation god of Jinsu. However, the constellation god of Jinsu was in a daze with her head lowered. She did not respond to Ma Yujia's call at all. How did Lord Jinsu become like this? Could it be that he was forcibly soul-searched? Ma Yujia thought of something, and his face became very ugly. Forcibly soul-searching could easily destroy one's divine soul, turning the person who was soul-searched into a fool. The constellation god of Jinsu's symptoms were very similar to being forcibly soul-searched. Her divine soul was damaged, and her consciousness became dull and blurry. No wonder Jiao Su and the others know about me and Brother Zhua. It turns out that Lord Jinsu. Ma Yujia clenched his fists tightly. His heart burned with anger, but more than that he felt powerless. He was now a prisoner and there was no way out. Ma Yujia was still trying to contact Zhuan, but there was still no response. He knew that Zhuan was at a critical juncture of breaking through. Zhuan broke through, he would definitely inform him at the first moment. What should I do? Ma Yujia was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Although he did not know what the constellation god of Jinsu was talking about, he knew that it was not something good. Suddenly, Ma Yujia noticed that the constellation god of Jinsu's eyes in the opposite cage had burst open. A black bug slowly crawled out. The moment this black bug crawled out, a pair of thin wings spread open, and it quickly flew towards Ma Yujia's cage. To Ma Yujia's surprise, this black bug ignored the restrictions on the surface of the cage and directly passed through it. This is a mechanical bug? Ma Yujia looked at the black bug in his palm and realized that it did not have any aura of life. Instead, it was refined from some kind of divine wood. There were also many complicated patterns on it. The black bug suddenly collapsed, and its stomach split open, revealing a crystal-clear opening. There's a spatial divine artifact inside this bug's stomach. Ma Yujia's eyes flashed with surprise as he sank his consciousness into it. Soon after, a crystal-clear pearl appeared in his palm, as well as an emerald jade slip. After Ma Yujia finished reading the jade slip, he sighed deeply and forced himself to stand up. He knelt down heavily and bowed deeply to the constellation god of Jinsu. Lord Jinsu, thank you for your good intentions. Yujia will definitely not let you down. Ma Yujia's eyes reddened as he kowtowed 3 times. The contents of the jade slip were not very long. It mainly described the pearl's function and origin for Ma Yujia, as well as some of Jinsu's own experiences. This pearl was called the primordial god pearl. It was a pearl that the imperial astronomer had deduced at the cost of 70% of his lifespan. The constellation god of Jinsu had spent countless years to find this pearl. This divine pearl had cost the two of them countless blood, sweat, and tears, all for the sake of handing it over to the future primordial god king. The imperial astronomer had long predicted that there would be 3 heavens chosen children. Moreover, one of the 3 heavens chosen children would definitely be the future primordial god king. The primordial god pearl was the eye of the previous primordial god king. It was said that the heavens chosen children with the aptitude of a primordial god king could be directly teleported to the previous primordial god king and obtain the primordial god king's inheritance. Originally, once Zhuan and Ma Yujie met up with the constellation god of Jinsu, the latter would hand the pearl over to Ma Yujie. However, the constellation god of Jinsu did not have the time to meet up with Zhuan and Ma Yujie before she was captured by the 4 paragons. Her soul was forcefully searched, and her communication jade slip and spatial divine artifact were taken away. She was then locked in the deepest part of the dungeon. Chapter 48:26. The constellation god was well aware of the greed and selfishness of the 4 paragons, so he and the imperial astronomer had immediately concealed the existence of the heaven's chosen son. They planned to rely on their own strength to protect the heaven's chosen son and allow him to truly grow. Once he fell into the hands of the 4 paragons, the heaven's chosen son's soul and body would be taken over by them in order to grasp his potential and strength. For this reason, the divine constellation of Zhun constellation had hidden the most important primordial divine pearl in his eyeball, just in case. In the end, the constellation god's actions were successful. Although his soul was damaged and his consciousness was dulled, he had successfully delivered the primordial god pearl into Ma Yujie's hands. 4 paragons, you all really deserve to die. Ma Yujie clenched his fists tightly. He had already guessed that the divine transfer ceremony that the constellation god had mentioned was probably to take over his so-called heaven's chosen son. Moreover, the constellation god had set his sights on Zhuan. Clearly, he didn't want to let Zhuan off the hook. Ma Yujie had never imagined that the 4 paragons who actually controlled the primordial gods would be such a group of selfish and vile people. It was no wonder that the primordial gods had been beaten so badly by the primordial heavenly demons, to the point that all that remained was Sacred Star City. The 4 paragons were the true culprits, the sinners of countless primordial gods. I must rescue Lord Constellation God. Ma Yujie's eyes shone with determination. As long as he could get close to Lord Constellation God, he could use the primordial god pearl to teleport away. Suddenly, a terrifying wave of energy emanated from Ma Yujie's body. Moreover, this wave of energy was becoming more and more frightening. This wave of energy is coming from the great world? Ma Yujie was startled at first, but then he hurriedly took out the great world that had turned into dust. Suddenly, the fluctuation became even more terrifying and clear. It was as if countless ripples were spreading out, layer upon layer. These are leaves. Ma Yujie was stunned to discover that as the wave of energy became more and more frightening, leaves flickering with purple light gradually appeared in the surrounding space. These leaves were not real, but the manifestation of some kind of extremely high-level power. Moreover, there were more and more leaves. It was as if he was in an autumn forest and saw all the leaves fluttering in the wind. As more and more purple leaves appeared, the ripples continued to spread out. The countless black clouds outside the cage let out mournful cries and hid far away as if they were avoiding the plague. Ma Yujie seemed to have sensed something as he suddenly realized that the shadow of a mysterious purple tree was slowly appearing in the cage. What shocked him even more was that the purple tree phantom was constantly growing. The trunk was getting thicker and thicker, and the branches and leaves were getting more and more luxuriant, as if it was going to cover the sky. As for the frightening energy ripples, they appeared densely and filled the entire cage. In fact, they were even spreading out of the cage. This is the primordial Hongmeng tree? What a terrifying aura. Did Brother Zhuo break through? But how can there be such a powerful aura when breaking through to the primordial god realm? Ma Yujie was dumbfounded. He immediately recognized the purple tree phantom. Wasn't it the same primordial Hong Meng tree that reached heaven and earth in the chaotic starry sky? It was exactly the same. Subsequently, Ma Yujie discovered that on the highest treetop of the purple tree, a figure was quietly sitting cross-legged. Above his head, four primordial Hong Meng stones were rapidly rotating. Rays of mysterious purple light mixed with gold sprinkled out, illuminating the figure like a supreme god. Brother Joie! Ma Yujie's eyes lit up as he stared at the figure on the highest treetop. At this moment, Zhuo's aura was too terrifying. His entire body was shrouded in a mysterious purple-gold light, and countless purple leaves were revolving around Zhuo's body. Boom boom boom. The primordial Hong Meng tree's shadow continued to grow. It pierced through the cage and headed for the top floor of the dungeon. To everyone's horror, the primordial Hong Meng tree's shadow seemed to possess some kind of unparalleled power. The countless restrictions in the cage seemed to have lost their effectiveness. They shattered one after another and turned into countless light spots. The entire dungeon was completely shaken by the commotion caused by Zhuo's breakthrough. Figures rushed out of the dungeon and stared at the giant purple tree that was constantly producing leaves. Ma Yujie was overjoyed when he saw that the cage opposite him had also been broken. He helped the dazed constellation god up and leaped up, landing on a treetop not far from Zhuo. Ma Yujie looked at Zhuo and saw that the latter's eyes were still closed, as if he was in some kind of epiphany. At this moment, Zhuo's cultivation was very mysterious. He looked like an ordinary primordial god, but upon closer inspection, he was filled with all kinds of variables. Boom! The giant tree broke out of the dungeon and continued to rush towards the sky. The roots of the tree spread out in all directions at an unparalleled speed. Upon closer inspection, the giant tree's roots grew thicker and sturdier, from a zhang thick to 100 zhang thick, then several hundred zhang thick. The roots radiated toward the surroundings of Sacred Star City, piercing through buildings and reducing them to dust. What's going on? A loud shout came from the Horn Constellation God and the other three paragons, appearing not far from the dungeon. Other than that, the Sacred Star City was also alarmed. Numerous constellation gods and primordial gods rushed out and stared at the primordial Grand Mist tree's silhouette in shock. Lord Horn Constellation. This subordinate also didn't know that such a divine tree would suddenly grow in the depths of the dungeon. Moreover, it's constantly growing and radiating. We tried to stop it, but it was to no avail. The several primordial gods in charge of the dungeon all knelt before the Horn Constellation God and kowtowed. The Horn Constellation God's eyes were dark as he looked up and immediately saw Zhuo, Ma Yujie, and the Constellation God at the top of the tree. It's all they're doing. The Constellation God of the Horn Constellation had a dark look in his eyes. His fury was like an erupting volcano, spewing forth without restraint. Kill, kill, kill. How dare you imprison us for so long and torture us every day? What Constellation God? What four paragons? You're just a bunch of hypocrites. I didn't do anything wrong, but you imprison me. Serves you right for letting the otherworldly demons attack your doorstep. Suddenly, figures charged out from the depths of the dungeon and began to madly attack the primordial gods guarding the dungeon. Most of these primordial gods imprisoned in the dungeon were primordial gods who had been wrongly accused by the four paragons and secretly imprisoned here. They had been saved by the primordial Hong Meng tree and regained their freedom. They began to retaliate against the four paragons and the primordial gods in the dungeon. Chapter 48:27. The ancient gods charged out of the prison and madly charged at the many ancient gods guarding the prison. They had been locked up in the depths of the prison all day and night, constantly being whipped by the guards. Their hearts had long since been filled with resentment. Now that they were finally free, they urgently needed to vent their anger, so they vented all their anger on the guards who had whipped them in the past. There were far too many prisoners in the prison, several thousand of them, and the sight of all of them rushing out was a spectacular sight. And there were only several dozen guards guarding the prison. How could these guards withstand the attacks of so many prisoners? The moment they touched the prisoners, they were killed. You're all seeking death. The constellation god of the Horn Constellation was infuriated to see these prisoners slaughtering in front of him. With a wave of his sleeves, countless astral soldiers appeared in the void and flew through the air. Many of the prisoners were penetrated by the astral soldiers in the blink of an eye. A small number of extremely strong prisoners were already on guard. The moment they saw the constellation god of the Horn constellation attack, they hurriedly retreated, barely managing to avoid the attacks of so many star soldiers. Die! The constellation god of the Horn constellation narrowed his eyes, and his killing intent surged. He waved his sleeve, and countless astral soldiers gathered into a terrifying storm. Their speed increased dramatically, and they instantly crushed the stronger prisoners who were retreating into dust. Constellation of the Horn. Who is this boy? There doesn't seem to be anyone like him in the prison. The constellation god of the great constellation frowned slightly as she pointed at Zhuo, who was sitting cross-legged on the treetop. And it wasn't just the constellation god of the head constellation. The constellation god of the head constellation and the constellation god of the well constellation were also puzzled. The constellation god of the Horn constellation had a gloomy expression as he said, "If my guess is correct, this boy should be that Zhuan, the second heaven's chosen child." He's that Zhuan? But how did he get here? The constellation god of the head constellation narrowed his eyes in surprise. The constellation god of the head constellation and the constellation god of the well constellation were also puzzled. This prison was the most heavily guarded forbidden zone in Sacred Star City. As long as someone broke in, they would not be able to escape their eyes. However, this Zhuan had silently appeared in the dungeon. What was even more bizarre was that the enormous purple tree phantom beneath him was actually able to break through the restrictions of the entire dungeon, directly penetrating through and destroying the entire dungeon. This looks like the primordial Hong Meng tree. The constellation god of the well stared at the purple tree that was still growing and suddenly spoke. As soon as he said that, constellation god and the others recognized him. At first, they thought he looked familiar, but they didn't think much of it. At this moment, the constellation gods who were still in Sacred Star City were all alarmed. They had already gathered near the dungeon. Countless primordial gods stood in the distance, looking at the primordial Hong tree's silhouette with astonishment in their eyes. Lord Jiaosu, what the hell is this? And those three people were... Isn't that the Zhen Mansion? Yeah, that was indeed Jinsu. Didn't Jinsu say that he was in seclusion? Why would he appear in this dungeon? Moreover, he seems to be quite mentally unstable. The constellation gods looked at the primordial tree. They immediately noticed the constellation god of the chariot constellation, who was being supported by Ma Yujia. However, the Zhen Mansion god had a silly smile on his face. He didn't look like a normal person at all. The Zhen Mansion god had been jointly imprisoned by the four paragons. They had also lied that the Zhen Mansion god was in seclusion and couldn't participate in the great divine demon war for the time being. The other constellation gods didn't suspect anything. They also didn't think that the Zhen Mansion god had been secretly imprisoned in the dungeon by the four paragons. Moreover, his soul had been searched and he had become mentally retarded. The four paragons exchanged glances. Among them, constellation god of the Jiaosu god said angrily, "Everyone! These two are the heaven's chosen children that the Zhen Mansion god spoke of. Yesterday, I kindly brought the two of them to Sacred Star City to meet the Zhen Mansion god. I thought that things would develop in a good direction. Who would have thought that the two of them would poison the Zhen Mansion god and ambush him, causing him to become mentally retarded? Everyone! These two heaven's chosen children aren't good people at all. They are vicious and vicious people. They are no different from heavenly demons. We can't let them off just like that. Now, they are holding the Zhen Mansion god hostage to threaten us. We can't be coerced by them." The moment he said that, many constellation gods were filled with righteous indignation. However, there were also a few constellation gods who looked deeply at constellation god of the Jiaosu god but didn't say a word. How despicable and shameless! Ma Yujia gnashed his teeth in anger when he heard the constellation god of the Jiaosu god's words. This constellation god of the Jiaosu god was simply distorting the truth. The Zhen Mansion god had become like this because of the four paragons. Now, they were actually pushing all the blame to him and Zhuan. They were simply too shameless. However, when Ma Yujie saw that the other constellation gods were either convinced or silent, he knew that the only one who could save him now was himself. When he thought of this, Ma Yujie gripped the primordial god Pearl tightly. Once the constellation god of the Jiao Su god and the others attacked, he would have to use the primordial god Pearl to teleport away. Ma Yujie glanced at Juan, who was still sitting cross-legged on the treetop with his eyes closed. If he had any other choice, he wouldn't want to interrupt Zhuowen's breakthrough. However, if it really came down to it, he would have to forcefully interrupt Zhuowen's breakthrough and use the primordial god Pearl. "I'll take them down." One of the constellation gods snorted coldly. With a stomp of his foot, a terrifying divine power poured out like the eruption of an ocean. He charged toward Zhuowen and Ma Yujie, who were on the treetop. Ma Yujie immediately tensed up and gripped the primordial god Pearl tightly. This constellation god was extremely fast. He held a dazzling saber in his hand. Before he arrived, the saber in his hand was already slashing through the air. The terrifying and dazzling saber light cut through the sky as if it was going to split the entire world in half. Rumble! However, to everyone's astonishment, the moment the saber light fell in front of Zhuowen and Ma Yujie, countless purple leaves flew over and blocked the saber light. The constellation god turned pale with fright as he stared at the scene before him in disbelief. Bang! Countless purple leaves swept over and violently pushed the constellation god away. The latter grunted and landed on the ground, barely managing to stabilize himself. "What's with this purple tree? How can it be so powerful?" The constellation god turned pale with fright. It wasn't just this constellation god. The other constellation gods were the same. The pupils of the four paragons shrank to the size of needles as they revealed looks of disbelief. If their senses weren't wrong, Yuan should have just broken through to the primordial god level. So why was the purple tree so terrifying? The constellation god of the Jiao Su god's gaze fell on Zhuowen and his eyes slowly narrowed. He discovered that Zhuowen's current state was very strange. His aura was full of variables and was very unusual. Chapter 48:28. It really is the primordial stone. It seems like he has gained the favor of the primordial tree. The constellation god of the Horn constellation narrowed his eyes as he looked at the four rotating primordial stones above Zhuowen's head. The primordial Hong tree was mysterious and powerful enough to rival the entire Archean star system. Even the four paragons were in awe of the primordial Hong tree. Even though they frequently went to the primordial Granmus tree to pluck the starry sky fruits, they only plucked the fruits that were allowed by the primordial Granmus tree. If they violated the primordial Granmus tree's rules, even the constellation gods could be killed by the primordial Granmus tree. Mansion of the Horn. These are primordial stones. Moreover, there are 4 complete primordial stones. Back then, we searched for them for a long time but were unable to find them. Who would have thought that they would be in the hands of this ant? The constellation god's eyes were filled with greed as he stared fixedly at the 4 rotating primordial stones above Zhuowen's head. It wasn't just the Well constellation god. The Dual constellation god and the Kuei constellation god felt the same way. They knew the importance of the primordial stone. In the end, the primordial Granmus tree's silhouette pierced through the heavens and the earth, and it shot straight into the depths of the clouds, as if it was connecting heaven and earth together. Attack! Break the primordial Granmus tree's shadow and snatch the primordial Granmus stone. Jiao Su made a prompt decision. He looked at the other 3 leaders and gave them a look. Then, they rushed to the top of the purple tree together. At the same time, the Mansion of the Horn transmitted a message to the constellation gods and primordial gods in the sacred star city, instructing them to attack the primordial Granmus tree together. In an instant, terrifying attacks blasted out from every corner of the divine star city, landing on the primordial Hong tree's shadow. Damn it! That old man Jiao Su is really despicable. Ma Yujie gripped the primordial god Pearl tightly. Seeing the terrifying attacks coming at him, his heart turned cold. With his cultivation, if he was hit by these attacks, he would die without a doubt. Thinking of this, Ma Yujie looked at Zhuan again, only to see that the latter was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, as if he had fallen into a mysterious state. Ma Yujie thought about it and strode forward. He brought the constellation god to the treetop where Zhuan was. His eyes were filled with vigilance. Boom! Suddenly, 4 stalwart figures appeared on the treetops at the highest level. Each of them struck out with their palms. Terrifying divine power poured out in torrents and actually caused the purple tree's illusory shadow to sway. Countless purple leaves swept forward like a hurricane, blocking Zhuan, Ma Yujie, and star god Zhen. They blocked the attacks of the 4 figures. The 4 paragons. Ma Yujie immediately recognized the 4 stalwart figures before him. His eyes were filled with hatred. Ma Yujie, I'll give you a chance. Take the primordial stone from him and hand it to us. We can spare your life. The constellation god of the Horn constellation had a cold look in her eyes as she formed hand seals. Countless astral weapons poured down like a storm, causing the purple tree phantom to tremble violently as if it could not hold on any longer. Ma Yujie, don't go astray. Hurry up and bring me the primordial stone. The other 3 paragons also urged Ma Yujie, wanting him to snatch the primordial stone from Zhuan's body. Ma Yujie's face was filled with a cold smile as he said, "As the 4 paragons of the immemorial gods, don't you feel ashamed? You should be guiding and educating the immemorial gods. Who would have thought that you would be so selfish and turn the entire immemorial gods into a foul atmosphere?" The constellation god of the Horn constellation said coldly, "So you're not following our orders?" Ma Yujie sneered. He could not be bothered to look at the constellation god of the Horn constellation, but he tightened his grip on the primordial god pearl. Once this purple tree phantom is destroyed, it'll be useless even if you beg for mercy. The constellation god of the Horn constellation snorted and exchanged glances with the other 3 paragons. They then began to attack the purple tree phantom with all their might. For a moment, the purple tree phantom trembled even more violently, as if it would collapse at any moment. Billions of miles away, the heavenly demon king looked at the newly revived Emo Shuji and nodded inwardly. The 2 true demons, Oxhead and Dragonhead, looked at Emo Shuji with fear in their eyes. At this moment, Emo Shuji's appearance had completely changed. His entire body was covered in sinister armor, and his eyes were scarlet and sinister. The aura that erupted from him was especially frightening, surpassing that of an ordinary true demon. If the demonic slaughter god and demonic art god were here, they would probably be suppressed by Emo Shuji's aura and would find it difficult to move. After all, even Oxhead and Dragonhead felt that Emo Shuji was filled with danger. "Many thanks, my king." Emo Shuji's eyes were indifferent as he looked at the heavenly demon king and slowly knelt on one knee. The heavenly demon king nodded in satisfaction. "Your aptitude really didn't disappoint me. After the transformation, your strength has surpassed most true demons. Not bad, not bad." Emo Shuji's expression was still indifferent, as if he had lost interest in everything. There was no extra emotion on his face. Suddenly, the heavenly demon king sensed something and raised his head, looking in the direction of Sacred Star City. A towering purple tree shadow appeared in front of him. The purple tree shadow exuded an astonishing aura as countless purple leaves spun around like a whirlpool. On the top of the purple tree, there were 3 figures. One of them was sitting cross-legged, and his entire body was emitting shocking ripples. "That's..." The heavenly demon king's eyes narrowed. The moment he saw the face of the cross-legged figure, a trace of emotion finally appeared on his calm face. Emo Shuji also looked in the distance and naturally saw the cross-legged figure. For some reason, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity when he saw this person. What a familiar feeling! This is clearly the first time I've seen this person, so why does he give me such a familiar feeling? Emo Shuji stared at the figure. Suddenly, he noticed that the figure suddenly opened his eyes, and a blazing purple light bloomed in the depths of his sharp eyes. At this moment, Emo Shuji was enlightened and muttered to himself, "He is Lord Emo Jua." With a loud explosion, the towering purple tree's silhouette was destroyed. who was sitting cross-legged on the tree, was grabbed by Ma Yujie and disappeared into thin air. What's going on? The moment the purple tree collapsed, the constellation god and the other 3 paragons didn't even have time to smile as they stared blankly at Ma Yujie and Zhuowen, who had disappeared. Just now, the 3 of them had disappeared too suddenly. They didn't even feel the slightest fluctuation in space. Even the 4 paragons couldn't do this, so how did Ma Yujie and the other 2 do it? Constellation of the Horn. What should we do now? The constellation god frowned and asked. The constellation god's mind was in a mess as he said, "Search. First, search the Divine Star City and the surrounding 18 cities. Maybe they have been teleported to some corner." The other 3 paragons looked at each other helplessly. They knew that this was the only way. Chapter 48-29. Due to unknown reasons, Searchdog is unable to search for this website today. Dear readers, please remember this website's domain name and find your way home. Where is this? Zhuowen raised his head and looked around. He discovered that he was in a world of white. This world was endless and was completely filled with white light. He could not see anything else. Zhuowen suddenly raised his head to look. He discovered that at the very top of this strange space, there was a huge purple-gold divine crown. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the purple-gold crown was not a physical object. Instead, it was formed by countless strange and powerful runes. What made Zhuowen's expression change was that every rune in the purple-gold divine light gave him a terrifying feeling. It was as if every rune he touched could annihilate him. The surface of the purple-gold divine light was densely packed with such powerful runes. They were endless. What was even stranger was that there was a mysterious golden coffin hanging below the purple-gold divine crown. The golden coffin was huge and there were many carvings on its surface. From afar, there were many birds and beasts, as well as humans, demons, gods, and Buddhas. Brother Zhua, congratulations, you've finally broken through to the primordial god realm. It seems like you've also been recognized by the primordial Hong tree? A familiar voice rang out. Zhuowen turned his head and saw the plump Ma Yujie carefully supporting an old man with a silly smile on his face as they walked over. Brother Ma, what the hell happened? Lord Jinsu? Zhuowen was puzzled. His gaze fell on the old man beside Ma Yujie and he recognized the latter's identity. Ever since he went into seclusion and started to break through to the primordial god realm, he was enlightened and formed a mysterious connection with the primordial Hong tree. Therefore, the strange phenomenon of the primordial Hong tree's shadow appearing around him the moment he broke through. Of course, Zhuowen was completely unaware of everything that happened in the outside world. At that time, he had been completely immersed in comprehending. The moment the primordial Hong tree communicated with him, he had been enlightened. It was as if he had been enlightened and understood many things. That was why he couldn't wake up for a long time. It was because he had fallen into a mysterious state that was even more advanced than enlightenment. What kind of state was incomparably extraordinary? The moment he opened his eyes, his connection with the primordial Hong Meng tree gradually disappeared, which was why the primordial Hong Meng tree's shadow had shattered. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the 4 paragons were, they wouldn't have been able to break through the primordial Hong tree's power. Thus, Lord Jinsu was forcefully soul-searched and became like this. Ma Yujie looked at the foolish old man beside him, his eyes filled with pity as he spoke. What happened? Zhuowen asked with a gloomy expression. It's like this. Ma Yujie sighed softly and recounted everything that had happened in the sacred star city. After Zhuowen finished listening, his eyes were filled with iciness and rage. He punched the ground fiercely and said, "The 4 paragons are really the scum of the primordial god." Ma Yujie said helplessly, "In the past, I didn't know why the primordial god powerhouses would be defeated by the weak primordial sky fiends. Now, it seems like I already know the reason. It's all because of the incompetence of these 4 paragons. The one who truly caused the primordial god to reach a dead end wasn't the primordial sky fiends, but the primordial god's upper management. If the primordial god king was still here, this wouldn't have happened." Zhuowen fell silent. He did not expect that the primordial god's management was actually so corrupt. No wonder the imperial astronomer told them to find Jin Su directly and not the four paragons back then. Presumably, the imperial astronomer had long known what kind of trash the four paragons were. Brother Ma, is this the space where the previous primordial god king is? What a strange place. Zhuan looked around, and his gaze finally landed on the purple gold divine crown in the sky. He continued, Brother Ma, I don't know if you still remember that the imperial astronomer once guided out the power in your body. Back then, you had such a purple gold divine crown. As he spoke, Zhuan pointed at the purple gold divine crown on the golden coffin. Ma Yujia's eyes flickered as he said, It seems that the imperial astronomer and Lord Jin Su were right. I really do have a chance to inherit the power of the primordial god king. The moment I entered this space, a lot of unfamiliar information appeared in my mind. This information exists in this space. It should have been left behind by the previous primordial god king. Yuan asked in surprise, Brother Ma, I remember you once said that ever since the primordial star system was formed, there has never been a primordial god king. Why is there a previous primordial god king now? After Ma Yujie received the information in this space, his gaze became much wiser. At that time, I didn't know because my knowledge came from the primordial gods' history books, and those books were tampered with by the four great chiefs and the other constellation gods. Therefore, I thought that the primordial star system really didn't have a primordial god king. But now, I've received a portion of the primordial god king's information and understand that those were all lies and schemes of the four great chiefs. The true primordial god king existed and appeared together with the primordial star system. At that time, the primordial god king was the only primitive life form in the entire primordial star system. He felt too lonely, so he cut off his own blood essence and flesh and cultivated the 28 constellation gods. Later, he felt that the 28 constellation gods were too few, so he cut off even more flesh and cultivated many more primordial gods. From then on, the primordial god race appeared. But because the primordial god king used up a large amount of blood essence and flesh, it damaged his own Tao foundation. Every 100,000 years, he would fall into a deep sleep for 3 days. This was originally his secret, but it was later found out by the four great chiefs. The four great chiefs were too selfish and had a strong desire for power. They didn't want to be disciplined by the primordial god king, so after they found out about the primordial god king's secret, they took advantage of the primordial god king's slumber and ruthlessly attacked him. Although the primordial god king's life force was vigorous, he was attacked by the four great chiefs for 3 days and 3 nights without any resistance. His flesh and soul were crushed countless times by their power. In the end, the primordial god king was on the verge of death. 3 days later, the primordial god king regained a trace of consciousness, but he was already on the verge of death. In the end, he used all his strength to escape and enter this primordial space. This space was the place where the primordial god king was born. But the primordial god king's injuries were too severe. He knew that he couldn't hold on for much longer, so he sealed himself in the golden coffin and let a trace of his soul escape the primordial star system and enter the primordial chaos tree's starry sky fruit. But this trace of soul was too incomplete. When this trace of soul awakened, it lost most of its memories. It only knew that it came from the primordial star system, and its only wish was to return to the primordial star system. At this point, Ma Yujie's voice was filled with sorrow and vicissitudes. So, you're the reincarnation of the primordial god king's remnant soul? Zhuan looked at Ma Yujie and asked in a low voice. Yes, Ma Yujie said calmly. Chapter 48:30. After listening to Ma Yujie's narration, Nguyen was speechless for a long time. He was shocked by Ma Yujie's narration. He had thought that Ma Yujie could become the new primordial divine king in the future, but he had never thought that the latter was actually a remnant soul of the previous primordial divine king. No wonder he was unable to investigate Ma Yujie's background even when he had the primordial stone. It turned out that his background was so great. Brother Zhua. Next, I will begin to accept the primordial divine king's inheritance. After I completely inherit it, I will use the power of the form origin to repair my Tao foundation. Once my Tao foundation is repaired, I will punish the 4 leaders and expel the heavenly demon. Ma Yujia's eyes burst out with a resplendent divine light, and his entire body emitted a mysterious and powerful aura. The form origin? Zhuowen raised his head and looked at the purple gold divine crown that was suspended above the golden coffin. What you think is right. That is the form origin. Ma Yujia smiled and explained when he saw Zhuowen looking at the purple gold divine crown. Zhuowen nodded and sighed in his heart. He had to admit that Ma Yujia's journey had not been easy. Brother Ma, according to the prophecy of the imperial astronomer, if we want to defeat the heavenly demon king, we must gather the power of 3 heaven's chosen children. Do you have any idea about the 3rd heaven's chosen child? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Ma Yujia's eyes revealed a look of contemplation as he said, the imperial astronomer once said that the 3rd heaven's chosen child is in the chaotic starry sky. It's very likely that he's hiding in the 100 domains outside the realm. Moreover, I believe that defeating the heavenly demon king is not the power of the 3 heaven's chosen children, but the 3 types of qi, form, and quality origin powers. However, the heaven's chosen children can unearth and inherit these 3 types of origin powers. Zhuowen nodded. He also felt that Ma Yujia's words were the most reasonable. Only by inheriting the corresponding origin powers would the 3 heaven's chosen children have the qualifications to fight against the heavenly demon king. Brother Zhua, you should have communicated with the primordial tree's quality origin, right? Ma Yujia stared straight at Zhuowen and asked with a smile. When Zhuowen had broken through to the primordial god realm, a projection of the primordial Hongmeng tree had appeared. At that time, Ma Yujia had no idea what was going on. Now that he had entered the primordial godly monarch's space and inherited a portion of the primordial godly monarch's memories, he immediately knew that it was a phenomenon caused by Zhuowen's communication with the primordial Hongmeng tree. Zhuowen nodded and said, yes. The moment I broke through, the primordial Hongmeng tree summoned me. Next, I need to return to the primordial Hongmeng tree to accept the inheritance and trial. Ma Yujia smiled casually and said, you and I are communicating with the power of Source at the same time. Looks like it's not a coincidence. It should be fated by the heavens. I believe that the 3rd heaven's chosen child has already communicated with the final source of energy. Zhuowen nodded in agreement and said in a deep voice, Brother Ma, the primordial Hongmeng tree's call to me is getting stronger and stronger. I think I'll be able to leave this place soon. I'll leave the primordial gods in my great world to you. This space is the place where the primordial godly monarchs are born. I think it should have unimaginable benefits for those young primordial gods. Moreover, I'm not from the primordial god clan, so I can't teach them at all. Ma Yujia smiled and said, leave it to me. Actually, even if you don't say it, I will say that this space is tailor-made for the primordial gods. The flow of time here is many, many times slower than the outside world. I'm afraid that before the great fiend god war ends in the outside world, these little fellows might have already become powerhouses. Moreover, this space is filled with the consciousnesses of the primordial godly monarchs. I can totally use these consciousnesses to transmit information, cultivation techniques, and all kinds of cultivation pointers to them. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. With a wave of his sleeve, tens of millions of young primordial gods were released. To Zhuowen's surprise, this space was indeed boundless. Tens of millions of young primordial gods appeared in this space, but it didn't feel crowded at all. When these young primordial gods appeared, they looked around in surprise at the vast expanse of white space around them. Children, you're all safe now. This space is the primordial dimension of the primordial God King. Cultivate with me, and I will pass on the primordial God King's true cultivation technique to you. Once you're strong, I will take you to fight against the celestial demon army so that you can avenge your parents and friends. Ma Yujia swear on this. While the young primordial gods were at a loss, Ma Yujia's voice resounded in their minds like thunder, dignified and sonorous. The young primordial gods quieted down and looked at Ma Yujia with resolute eyes. All the young primordial gods present had basically witnessed the deaths of their friends and family in the war. Their motivation to survive was to get stronger and avenge their loved ones. Lord Jun Constellation E. Zhuowen looked at the constellation god of Jun Constellation, who had a silly look on her face. Leave Lord Jun Su to me. Once I completely inherit the primordial god king's power, I will restore his consciousness. Ma Yujie calmly said. Zhuowen nodded, then he looked up at Ma Yujie and said, Brother Ma, I'll have to trouble you for everything. We'll meet again on the battlefield. As he spoke, Zhuowen's entire body emitted a mysterious purple light. The purple light grew more and more, forming a vortex that enveloped Zhuowen's entire body. We'll meet again on the battlefield. Ma Yujie was filled with pride as he laughed and watched Zhuowen's figure vanish into the violet vortex. Where is Zhuowen going? Two girls stepped forward, one with golden hair and the other with silver hair. The golden-haired girl worriedly asked as she watched Zhuowen vanish. To complete his mission, Ma Yujie softly said. Will we be able to see him again? The silver-haired girl curiously asked. Of course. Ma Yujie chuckled. When the time is right. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. He saw the boundless starry sky and the incomparably huge violet treetops beneath his feet. Under the violet treetops, there were resplendent starry sky fruits hanging from them. Looking down, there were thick tree trunks that one couldn't see the edges. They supported countless treetops and stretched across the pitch-black and cold void. Zhuowen was currently standing on the topmost treetops of the primordial Hongmeng tree. I'm finally back. Zhuowen gently sat on the treetops. His gaze pierced through the starry sky and looked in the direction of the 100 territories. He muttered, I wonder how Chen Shui, Wushang, father, mother, and Xiao He are doing? Suddenly, a mysterious violet leaf floated over and landed on Zhuowen's palm. A wave of information flowed from Zhuowen's palm into the depths of his mind. Don't worry. I'll be back when I see my family and friends. This leaf is our promise. Zhuowen put away the violet leaf and turned into a stream of light, disappearing from the primordial Hongmeng tree that spanned across the entire starry sky. Chapter 48-31. In the depths of the 99th level of the death prison. Below the gray lake was a completely different world. There was a vast and strange space. In this space, there were countless spatial turbulence, calamities, and energy. If one was not strong enough and fell into this space, they would die without a doubt. At the core of this space was a mysterious and dazzling ball of light. At the core of the ball of light was a golden coffin with an open lid. Inside the coffin lay a young man with a sparkling body. Below the coffin sat a young man with a golden vertical mark between his eyebrows. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura erupted from the young man's body. It was like an explosion that resounded throughout the entire space. A dazzling golden light shot out from the surface of the young man's skin, making him look like a sun with terrifying destructive power. So this is the power of the law of annihilation. This is the power of an immemorial god. It's really powerful. I feel like I only need to wave my hand and I can destroy any person or object in the chaotic starry sky. The young man laughed loudly. His long golden hair moved without wind, and his entire body exuded a strange and unpredictable aura. Sakyamuni, congratulations, congratulations. Your talent really didn't disappoint me. You actually successfully broke through to the immemorial god realm in such a short time. A hearty laugh came from outside the ball of light. Then, a huge three-headed bird flew through the air and entered the ball of light. This three-headed bird was none other than Bayan Sakyamuni slowly stood up, and the light around his body gradually faded. He looked at Bayan calmly and said, You flatter me. This is all thanks to your help. Bayan frowned slightly. He could acutely feel that Sakyamuni's attitude towards him had changed. Instead, he was not as cautious as before. Instead, he did not care at all. Although Bayan was a little unhappy, he did not dare to say anything. Sakyamuni had now broken through to the immemorial god realm, and his strength was above him. He was no longer a match for him. How could he dare to face Sakyamuni with the same attitude as before? Sakyamuni, now that you've successfully broken through, according to our agreement, you can break the death prison space. Then we can work together to take revenge on Tianju. Its eyes sparkled with excitement. It had been waiting for this moment for countless years. Tao Wu was tired of being locked up in the death prison all day. He wanted to leave. He wanted freedom. He wanted to make Tianju regret it. The time isn't ripe yet. Tianju had been an immemorial god for many years, right? Am I going out now? Otherwise, he might not be a match for Tianju. Let's talk about it after I absorb this primordial god corpse. Sakyamuni shook his head and rejected Momo's decision. And looked at Sakyamuni with displeasure and said, Sakyamuni. According to the contract, when you broke through to the primordial god realm, you broke the death prison and took revenge on Tianju. Now, do you want to break the contract? Sakyamuni looked at Bai and indifferently and said, Did I say that? The contract said very clearly that after I break through to the primordial god realm, I will break the death prison and take revenge on Tianju. But it didn't say when. Bai An's pupils constricted. He stared at Sakyamuni and said, Can't you understand my pain? I've been locked up here for too long. I want to go out now. You have to abide by the contract now. But don't be so shameless. I will abide by the contract, but you have no right to order me. When I go out, it's up to me to decide, not you. Sakyamuni said indifferently. Bastard. Bai and was furious. He almost lost his mind and rushed towards Sakyamuni. Violent energy erupted. However, the ball of light was extremely sturdy. Bai An's energy exploded on the surface, but it was completely fine. You're not my match. Sakyamuni shook his head and slapped out with his right hand, suppressing Bai onto the ground. The latter struggled with all his might but failed. Boom! Sakyamuni raised his right foot and stomped down fiercely. A terrifying power of destruction swept out. Bai groaned. The laws on his body were instantly destroyed, and he could not use any strength. Is this the power of an primordial god? It's too terrifying. Bai An's expression changed drastically. He finally regained some rationality and fear rose in his heart. Sakyamuni, I was wrong. Let me go. Bai An calmed himself down. Although he felt humiliated, he still said in a soft tone, Bai, become my mount. Sakyamuni said indifferently. Bai An was stunned. Then he flew into a rage and said, Sakyamuni, don't go too far. If it weren't for me, do you think you could break through to the primordial god realm and get all of this? Without me, you wouldn't be who you are now. Is this how you treat your benefactor? Sakyamuni sneered and said, Benefactor? Bai An, you must have misunderstood something, right? You just want to use me. Both you and I are well aware of that. Why talk about kindness? You only have one choice now, and that is to become my mount. Otherwise, you can only die here alone. Bai An was furious and said, Sakyamuni, we still have a contract. If you dare to kill me, you'll be violating the contract. Sakyamuni laughed loudly and said, You're too naive. You have no idea how strong the primordial gods are. My strength has already surpassed this universe. The contract I signed with you can only bind the past me. As for the current me, how can a mere contract restrain me? If I kill you now, I'll at most suffer a certain backlash and won't harm my life. But you'll definitely die. Bai An's heart shook, and his face gradually sank. He had miscalculated. He did not expect the primordial gods to be so powerful. I'll give you 3 breaths of time to consider. If you don't give me an answer, I'll tacitly accept your refusal, and then I'll kill you without hesitation. Sakyamuni said calmly. 1, 2, 3. The moment he said 3, the killing intent in Sakyamuni's eyes exploded, and Bai An was so frightened that he hurriedly agreed. From the killing intent released by Sakura, he could clearly feel that the former would really kill him, and it was the kind of killing without any hesitation. Bai An was afraid and had submitted. Submit to me. I won't humiliate you, because in the future, I will become the true ruler of this universe. When that time comes, the primordial star system will also be mine. The corners of Sakyamuni's mouth curled up. He walked in front of Bai An and formed a seal with his right hand. It landed between Bai An's eyebrows and placed the slave seal in the depths of Bai An's soul. Bai An lay on the ground in a daze, sighing in his heart. He did not expect that after escaping the tiger's den, he would enter the wolf's den. He had to admit that his luck was really bad. After planting the slave seal, Sakyamuni ignored Bai An and jumped up and landed in front of the golden coffin. The moment his right hand touched the primordial god's corpse, his expression changed slightly. He saw the primordial god's corpse collapse and turn into countless white lights. Chapter 48:32. Why is the corpse of the primordial god suddenly dispersing? And where is the energy in the corpse going? Sakyamuni looked at the countless white lights formed by the primordial god's dispersing body. They actually turned into a white river that flowed through the ball of light. Sakyamuni could clearly sense that as the white river flowed through the ball of light, the energy on the surface of the ball of light was constantly weakening. It was obvious that the white river was absorbing the power of the ball of light. Soon, the ball of light would collapse. What's going on? Didn't you say that the primordial god's corpse was eternal? Why is it dispersing just like that? Sakyamuni's expression was ugly as he coldly looked down at Bai. At this moment, Bai An was also dumbfounded. Even he found the transformation of the primordial god's corpse inconceivable. Master, I don't know either. I've been searching for this corpse for countless years, but this has never happened. Could this transformation have something to do with you, Master? Bai An asked cautiously. Sakyamuni snorted coldly but said nothing. Instead, he carefully observed the white river formed by the primordial god's corpse. Soon, the ball of light completely shattered, and the surging energy fused into the white river. The white river then swept into the depths of the space ahead. Without the protection of the ball of light, the countless calamities in this space immediately bombarded Sakyamuni and Bai. However, the two of them were very powerful, and these calamities did not cause any harm to them. Master, this? Bai An looked at the white river in the distance, wanting to say something but hesitating. After it, Sakyamuni coldly glanced at Bai An, and the latter shrunk his neck and obediently bent down. Sakyamuni stepped forward and landed on Bai An's back. Bai An spread his wings and chased after the white river like a gust of wind. The speed of the white river wasn't very fast, but wherever it passed, there would be spatial rifts. Through the spatial rifts, it shuttled through complicated spatial planes. As the white river continued to flow, the space calamity became more and more terrifying. In the beginning, Bai An was able to withstand it, but towards the end, he began to feel powerless. Many wounds appeared on his body. In order not to lose sight of Bai He, Sakyamuni released his own power to protect Bai He from being attacked by the calamities. That was how Bai He was able to continue chasing after Bai He. He didn't know how much time had passed, nor did he know how many spatial planes he had passed through. Finally, the white river stopped in a boundless space of nothingness. This void space was deep and dark. It was so dark that one couldn't even see one's own fingers. The only source of light was a huge golden mass of air in the center of the space. The ball of chi spread out like a spinning nebula. It looked dazzling and mysterious, especially the aura it emitted. It made Sakyamuni and Bai An feel that it was unreachable, and they felt ashamed of their inferiority. The white river stopped not far away from the golden mass of air. It seemed to be hesitating about something, but in the end, it drilled into the mass of air and became a part of it. What is this? The aura of this golden mass of air is much greater than that of the immemorial god's corpse, isn't it? Or rather, the two aren't even on the same level. Bai An looked at the golden mass of air in the center of the void space with shock and fear in his eyes. This is such a familiar aura. Sakyamuni looked at the golden mass of air that was spinning like a nebula. His eyes blurred as he leaped out of Bai An's body and headed toward the golden mass of air. Master, be careful, this massive air is too strange. And hurriedly advised. Unfortunately, Sakyamuni turned a deaf ear to him. He muttered something under his breath as he approached the golden mass of air. In the end, Sakyamuni rushed into the golden mass of air and disappeared completely under Anne's gaze. Master is too impulsive, isn't he? The origin of this golden mass of air is unknown. Why did he go in just like that? Anne frowned slightly as he turned to look at the path he came from. He sighed in his heart and frowned in distress. He had relied on Sakyamuni's power to enter this void space. If Sakyamuni died in the golden mass of air, it would be impossible for him to return to the death prison by himself. At that time, he would most likely be trapped in this strange void space. Anne was crestfallen and could only wait silently outside the golden mass of air. Now, other than waiting for Sakyamuni to come out, there was nothing else he could do. After all, it was impossible for him to leave by himself. Sakyamuni, don't die. And prayed in his heart. And waited for 3 days. The originally quiet golden mass of air finally changed. The golden ball of chi continued to shrink and soon disappeared, leaving behind only a golden figure. And looked over and found that the golden figure was none other than Sakyamuni. At this moment, Sakyamuni's body was like gold. His skin emitted a bright golden light, and the air emitted from his 7 apertures was also golden. The aura on his body was especially mysterious and unfathomable. From afar, he looked like an ordinary immemorial god. However, upon closer inspection, he seemed to be stronger than an immemorial god, giving off a mysterious and unfathomable feeling. The origin of air? So that's it. What bullshit immemorial god? What bullshit immemorial heavenly demon? They're all on the wrong path. They say they've transcended the great carefree realm. Unfortunately, they've only stepped into a fake realm. The real realm is the immemorial realm. Only by stepping into the immemorial realm can one transcend the great carefree realm. Sakyamuni laughed loudly. His voice was like thunder, spreading throughout the void space and exploding. Anne's expression changed greatly. At this moment, Sakyamuni's entire person seemed to have transformed. Although his realm did not change, his temperament was completely different. If the previous Sakyamuni was compared to a beggar, the current Sakyamuni was like the world's noblest emperor. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. Master, are you okay? Anne thought about it and asked in a low voice. Sakyamuni calmed down and glanced at Anne indifferently. Your vision is too narrow. Since you've become my mount, you can't ruin my reputation. You'll follow me to cultivate. I'll teach you an unworldly technique that will let you far surpass heaven end. Anne was stunned and secretly shook his head. He felt that Sakyamuni was bragging. Sakyamuni had just broken through to immemorial God. How could he have an unworldly technique that would let him surpass heaven end? How could that be possible? I know you don't believe me, but I'll make you completely convinced. Sakyamuni smiled and pointed at the void with his right hand. A golden light drilled into Anne's forehead. Then and let out a painful scream, holding his head and rolling on the ground. A strange memory invaded his mind, almost making his head explode. But as he gradually adapted, his expression became more and more shocked. Finally, he knelt in front of Sakyamuni and said with conviction, "Master, please help me. Don't worry. You, who know the truth, are also qualified to surpass the fake realm. As long as you're obedient from now on." Sakyamuni said indifferently, "Master, I dare not disobey." And hurriedly lowered his head and said in a trembling voice. Chapter 48-33. Currently, the Kanglan domain was still ranked first among all the supreme domains. In recent years, the Kanglan domain had produced many experts and was thriving, showing signs of becoming an invincible domain. Especially after Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luo Ye had broken through to the law phenomenon realm, the Kanglan domain's momentum had grown even greater. When Zhuowen arrived from the starry sky and passed through the Kanglan realm, he saw one region after another, one city after another, and one powerful aura after another hidden in various parts of the realm. Zhuo Wen nodded inwardly. It seemed that Duan Jipeng, Long Xiaotian, and the other administrators had managed the Kanglan domain very well during his absence. Following a familiar path, Zhuan finally arrived at the core of the Kanglan domain, the Kanglan Temple. "Who are you?" At the entrance of the temple, two guards immediately blocked Zhuo Wen's path and looked warily at Zhuan. The aura of the young man in front of them was very mysterious. Not only could they not see through him, but they also felt an inexplicable sense of worship. "My name is Zhuan," Zhuo Wen said calmly. Zhuan had been away for too long and these two guards were new, so it was reasonable that they did not recognize him. "Zhuo Wen? What a familiar name. Isn't this the founder of our Kanglan domain?" The two guards were stunned at first, then immediately revealed a look of horror as they stared fixedly at Zhuan. "Just as you think, I am that Zhuo Wen. Go and inform Duan Jipeng to come see me in person," Zhuo Wen said indifferently. The two guards were bewildered. In the end, although one of the guards could not confirm Zhuo Wen's identity, he still entered the Kanglan temple to report to Duan Jipeng. Not long after, powerful auras swept out from within the deep blue temple. The one in the lead was Duan Jipeng. Behind Duan Jipeng were Long Xiaoyan, Feng Xiyao, and the other top Ryuka officials. Zhuo Wen's gaze, on the other hand, was fixed on the two beautiful figures that were quickly rushing over. A warm and nostalgic smile appeared on his face. Because these two beautiful figures were the two women he cherished the most, Mu Chenxue and Moyan Wushang. Husband. Dun. Mu Chenxue and Moyan Wushang were the first to arrive. Each of them was holding on to one of Zhuo Wen's arms. The two women's eyes were already misty. There was even a trace of blame and resentment in their eyes. Zhuan had been away for too long. It was easy to imagine how much the two women missed Zhuan. Zhuan smiled embarrassedly, his eyes filled with guilt. "Brother Mu, you're finally back. I've been working myself to death all these years, but you've become a hands-off shopkeeper." Duan Jipeng came forward and gently punched Zhuan, his eyes looking up and down the ladder. What shocked him was that he could not see through Zhuo Wen's cultivation at all. He felt that Zhuo Wen's cultivation was much stronger than the experts in the invincible domain who had returned to the One. Could it be that Zhuan had gone missing all these years because he was hiding in a secret domain and had reached a higher realm? "Brother Duan, it's all thanks to you that the Kanglan domain can develop so well. I want to thank you this time," Zhuo Wen said sincerely. "Why are you suddenly so polite? It's embarrassing." Duan Jipeng scratched his head, a little embarrassed. Zhuan smiled slightly, his eyes falling on Long Xiaoyan and Feng Xiyao. He called out softly, "Father, mother." Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiyao were full of excitement. Long Xiaoyan said with a smile, It's good to be home, it's good to be home." Zhuan stepped forward, gently hugged Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiyao, and said with a sour nose, "Our son is home." Next, Zhuan had a good chat with every family and friend he knew, and then entered the Kanglan temple. "Brother Zhua, during the time you disappeared, the Abyss Master came to find you many times with several Saint Masters of the ancient Heavenly Tao Academy. Where have you been all this time?" In the Kanglan temple, everyone sat around Zhuo Wen, and Duan Jipeng couldn't help but ask. Back then, when the Abyss Master personally came with several Saint Masters, it gave Duan Jipeng and the others a fright. Whether it was the Abyss Master or the Saint Masters of the ancient Heavenly Tao Academy, they were all existences with sky-high cultivation. They could destroy any super realm with a flick of their fingers. But there were several such powerful existences, and their purpose was only to find Zhuan. This was really shocking. Mu Chenxue, Long Xiaotian, and the others also looked at Zhuan. They were also curious. Where had Zhuan gone all these years? The Abyss Master and the Saint Masters of the ancient Heavenly Tao Academy, in their eyes, were supreme and omnipotent existences, but even they couldn't find any trace of Zhuan. Zhuan took a light breath and said calmly, "Ma Yujie and I entered the ancient star system and experienced some things inside, and learned some truth." "What? The ancient star system?" In the hall, everyone couldn't help but be moved. That was the ancient star system, a place where countless experts in the chaotic starry sky wanted to enter, But Juan actually went in just like that. I heard that the ancient star system is a place like a fairyland where you can have anything you want. Is this true? Ziyang revealed a yearning look and couldn't help but ask. Juan shook his head and sneered, the ancient star system is now hell on earth. Even the indigenous ancient gods are living in an abyss of suffering. Juan slowly recounted the situation of the ancient star system, as well as what had happened during the years he lived there. After hearing this, everyone was shocked and looked at Juan in disbelief. The truth that Juan said was too naked, and it had an unimaginable impact on them. In their eyes, the high and mighty ancient gods were wantonly slaughtered by the ancient heavenly demon like livestock, without any dignity to speak of. And the one who could stop the heavenly demon king was actually the legendary? There were 3 heaven's chosen children, and Juan was one of them. In other words, after seeing us this time, you will return to the primordial Hongmeng tree to accept the inheritance of the source of essence? Long Xiaotian suddenly realized something and asked. Juan nodded and said, this matter concerns the life and death of the entire chaotic starry sky. I can't be careless. I came back this time to see you, and then I will go to the primordial Hongmeng tree. In fact, I am still worried about you. The immeasurable calamity is approaching, and the ancient heavenly demon is about to capture the last star city of the ancient gods. The 100 territories are too dangerous now, so I want to bring you into my great world. My great world is very safe now. During the time I accept the source of essence, nothing will happen to you. Hearing this, Duan Jipeng, Long Xiaotian, Mu Chenxue and the others looked at each other. They naturally had no objections. The crisis that the 100 territories had to face this time was far more terrifying than the immeasurable calamity. They were too weak, and if they continued to stay here, their lives could not be guaranteed. Seeing that everyone agreed to enter the great world, Zhuowen's suspended heart finally relaxed. For the next period of time, Zhuowen basically stayed in the Kanglin domain. At the same time, he sent a message to the Abyss Master, Xiao He, Shan Lingyun and the others, asking them to come to the Kanglin domain. Chapter 48-34. In the Abyss Mystic Realm. Shan Lingyun lay in the middle of the pool and sighed. It's been so long. Why is there still no news of my disciple? Where did my disciple go? Beside Shan Lingyun, a little black dog stood up like a human and sighed as well. The Abyss Master and several sage masters. Why can't we find a single person? They are too weak. Jun didn't really die in a foreign land, right? Blackie was dejected, and its pair of little claws kept scratching its little head as it spoke rather irritably. Where are the 2 of you now? What's the use of sighing? It's better to increase your strength as much as possible, especially you, Ling Yun. Bai Shuyuan looked at this pair of clowns sighing and immediately put on a stern face. She stared especially at Shan Lingyun and continued. Lingyun, as long as your soul speech technique surpasses mine, you will be able to predict Zhuowen's location and not be so helpless like now. The great soul speech master is right. Xiao He, the dragon race still has many secret techniques that you haven't learned. Hurry up and learn them from me. A huge golden dragon head stretched out from the abyss around the pool and looked at Xiao He sternly. Xiao He pursed her lips and suddenly felt something. She took out her communication jade talisman, which was flickering with a faint light. At the same time, Shan Lingyun also received the corresponding message. Someone sent me a message. Who is it? Xiao He was confused, but she still opened the communication jade talisman. After reading it, Xiao He was completely stunned. Not only Xiao He, but Shan Lingyun was also stunned. Then, the 2 of them said in unison, He's back. Who is he? Bai Shuyuan and the Golden Dragon King were confused. Dun. Xiao He and Shan Lingyun said in unison again. What? You found Zhuowen? Bai Shuyuan's beautiful eyes flickered, revealing a bright light. She was also unable to keep her cool. The Golden Dragon King, on the other hand, was calm and composed. His feelings for Zhuowen had always been average. Whether the latter returned or not had nothing to do with him. Lord Jin Ao. Zhuowen even said that he brought back a dragon called Zhu Huang. He should be our ancestor, right? Xiao He looked at the Golden Dragon King excitedly. Jin Ao nodded and said, "There was indeed a senior called Zhu Huang amongst the seniors of our dragon clan. According to the records of our dragon clan, Senior Zhu Huang should have transcended the chaotic starry sky a very long time ago and entered the supreme primeval star dimension." What did you just say? Xiao He said excitedly. Zhuan brought Zhu Huang Qianbei back. Impossible? Lord Zhu Huang was an expert of the dragon clan from many years ago. Moreover, he had ascended to the ancient star system long ago. How could he appear in the primal chaos starry sky? You can ask again, is it really Zhu Huang? Jin Ao's eyes widened as he hurriedly urged Xiao He. Xiao He shrugged and said, "Oh." Then, he used the communication jade talisman to ask. Soon he received a reply. Zhuan said that it is our dragon clan's ancestor, Zhu Huang. He brought him back from the ancient star dimension. It is said that this ancestor also wants to see his clan. Xiao He's eyes became exceptionally excited as he chattered. Jin Ao was stunned on the spot. After a long silence, he suddenly roared, "It really is Ancestor Zhu Huang. Ha, our dragon clan's ancestor has returned. Our dragon clan is saved." Jin Ao, don't be too complacent. The situation in the 100 territories is not good right now. Are you still thinking about your dragon clan? Right now, all living beings in the 100 territories are united. A dignified voice came from the sky above the secret realm. The Lord of the Deep Caves slowly descended with several stalwart figures. Lord Abyss Master. Bai Shuyuan, Shanling Yun, and Xiao He hurriedly bowed to the Abyss Master. You also received news from Zhuowen? Bai Shuyuan asked. The Abyss Master nodded and said, "Yes." As he spoke, the Abyss Master pointed to the 4 imposing figures beside him and introduced, "These 4 are Horned Dragon, Jin Yong, Shui Huan, and Gu Zhe from the ancient Heavenly Tao Academy. Greetings to the 4 sacred masters." Xiao He, Shanling Yun, and the others also bowed to the 4 sacred masters. "Ha, you are too polite. Since we have found the whereabouts of the heaven's chosen child, our mission is completed. We are ready to report back to the ancient Heavenly Tao Academy." Horned Dragon Sacred Master laughed. "Right. Abyss Master, if it is convenient, after you meet the heaven's chosen child, can you personally bring him to see the Dean? I think the Dean knows more about the immeasurable calamity than us. With him around, we should be more confident." Horned Dragon Sacred Master looked at the Abyss Master and said solemnly. The Abyss Master thought for a moment and said, "I will talk to Zhuo Xiaoyu about this. If he agrees, I will bring him to the ancient Heavenly Tao Academy. Then we will have to trouble you. We will take our leave first." Horned Dragon Sacred Master bowed to the Abyss Master and turned into 3 streaks of golden light with the other 3 sacred masters, disappearing from the Abyss secret realm. "Abyss Master, don't talk nonsense. Our dragon race has been suppressed by you for so many years. Now that our ancestor is back, he will definitely uphold justice for us. Just wait for your punishment." Jin Ao looked at the Abyss Master with hostility. The Abyss Master was not afraid and said calmly, "Zhuo Xiaoyu also said that I will bring you this time. I think that Senior Zhu Huang wants to see you. As an ancestor of the dragon race, I think he should be more sensible than you." "Let's wait and see," Jin Ao said provocatively. The Abyss Master shook his head and did not say anything. He waved his sleeve, and the invisible shackles on Jin Ao disappeared. "The shackles on the dragon race were not given to you by me, but by yourselves. I hope you understand. Now come with me," the Abyss Master said calmly. Jin Ao snorted coldly and leaped into the air. His enormous dragon body soared into the sky and faced the Lord of the Deep Caves from afar, baring his fangs. But in the end he did not attack the Abyss Master. Instead, he said with a complicated look, "Everything will be decided by Lord Zhu Huang. Let's see Lord Zhu Huang first." The Abyss Master smiled and looked at Xiao He and Shanling Yun. He said with a smile, "You two come with me too. Jin Ao is faster than us. Let's let him give us a ride." Jin Ao was furious. He said, "Abyss Master, what do you take me for? I'm not your mount. Even if you kill me, I won't carry you. Outside Abyss City, the Divine Lord of Pillar Ray, Bai Shuyuan, and other important figures of the Abyss region looked at the huge golden dragon that was gradually disappearing. At this moment, the Abyss Master stood silently on Jin Ao's dragon head. Xiao He and Shan Lingyun stood behind him, trying to hold back their laughter as they looked at the beaten dragon head. If you had admitted defeat and become a mount, you would not have to suffer such physical pain. Why do you have to do this? The Abyss Master shook his head and said helplessly. Jin Ao let out a low roar as if he was refuting the Abyss Master, but his voice was weak and feeble. Chapter 48-35. This is the Kanglin domain. Zhuo Xiaoyu said that he was waiting for us at the Kanglin temple. When Jin Ao shuttled through the void and arrived at the Kanglin domain, his dazzling golden dragon scales emitted dazzling golden light and attracted the attention of countless cultivators in the domain. Is that a dragon? What a huge body. I haven't seen a dragon in the 100 domains for a long time. I didn't expect to see a dragon again. This golden dragon has such a powerful aura. Look, there are people on the golden dragon. Where did these people come from? The aura they emit is so terrifying. In the Kanglin domain, countless cultivators looked up at Jin Ao's huge dragon body with awe. Master Jin Ao. The Kanglin temple is in that direction. Go there directly. Xiao He stood on Jin Ao's dragon horn with her little claws pointing to the east. She looked very energetic. Jin Ao nodded and jumped up. He soared 90,000 miles into the sky and disappeared in an instant. When Jin Ao appeared in the sky above the Kanglin temple, an earth-shattering dragon roar resounded. Countless guards around the temple looked at the Golden Dragon King who suddenly appeared above them with vigilance. Lord of the Deep Caves, Xiao He, Master. You are finally here. Go directly into the Kanglin temple. Suddenly, an ethereal and mysterious voice came from the depths of the temple. It was not loud, but it exploded in the minds of the Lord of the Deep Caves and the others. The Lord of the Deep Caves' eyes lit up. How did Zhuo Wen's voice appear in his mind? He did not even notice it. There was only a single possibility as to why such a situation would occur. That was, Zhuo Wen was stronger than him, and much stronger at that. What did Zhuo Xiaoyu go through in just over 100 years? How did you become so powerful? The Lord of the Deep Caves looked surprised. But soon, the Lord of the Deep Caves laughed and jumped out of Jin Ao's head furnace. He landed in front of the temple with Xiao He and Shan Lingyun. Jin Ao also transformed into a golden-robed middle-aged man. He followed closely behind the Abyss Master with vigilance in his eyes. Just now, Zhuo Wen's voice suddenly appeared in his mind, which indeed gave him a fright. How long had it been since they last met? The brat that he could easily slap to death had actually become so powerful? Zhuo Xiaoyu, I haven't seen you for more than 100 years. I didn't expect you to improve so quickly. The Lord of the Deep Abyss smiled and led everyone into the Deep Sea Temple. In the hall, Yuan sat on the main seat, and on either side of him sat Duan Jipeng, Mu Chenxue, Long Xiaotian, and other important Ryuka figures. When the Lord of the Abyss entered, Yuan stood up and led the Ryuka people to greet him. You're too kind, Lord of the Abyss. I was just lucky. Yuan came forward and led the Lord of the Deep Caves to the seats that had been prepared. On the other hand, Jin Ao's gaze was fixed on the middle-aged scholar behind Yuan. He could clearly feel that the middle-aged scholar was from the Dragon Clan, and he was much more powerful than him. Are you Lord Zhu Huang? Jin Ao asked the middle-aged scholar in a trembling voice. The middle-aged scholar was Zhu Huang. He looked at Jin Ao with a smile and said, I am indeed Zhu Huang. After I ascended to the ancient star system, I lost contact with the Dragon Clan. I didn't expect to see my clan members again one day. The current leader of the Dragon Clan, Jin Ao, greets Lord Zhu Huang. Jin Ao knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times to Zhu Huang solemnly. Blackie, on the other hand, stood beside Jin Ao and imitated him. Get up. Zhu Huang walked forward and helped Jin Ao and Xiao He up. He pointed at Zhuowen and said with a smile, if you want to thank someone, thank Zhuan. If it wasn't for him, I would have died in the ancient star system. Jin Ao turned pale with fright and said in disbelief, Lord Zhu Huang, you must be joking, right? Zhuowen's strength is far inferior to yours. How could he have the ability to save you? Zhu Huang shook his head and said, You underestimate him too much. He is the chosen one. Even if there are thousands of me, I can't compare to him. Hurry up and thank him. Jin Ao didn't dare to disobey Zhu Huang and quickly knelt to thank Chun. Xiao He followed suit, but when he realized that he was bowing to Zhuowen, he immediately straightened his back. Zhuowen was his sworn brother. How could he bow to his brother? Xiao He wouldn't do it. However, Jin Ao slapped him on the head and forced Xiao He's straightened back. We are thanking him from the Dragon Tribe's perspective. It has nothing to do with personal feelings. Jin Ao said solemnly. Xiao He smiled embarrassedly and bowed to Zhuowen as well. Zhuowen was amused. He quickly walked forward and helped the two of them up. Next, we'll be in the same boat. The 100 territories outside the ancient star system will face a true calamity. This concerns all of us. Zhuowen said with a solemn gaze. Zhuo Xiaoyu, is the calamity you're talking about the immeasurable calamity? The Abyss Master asked. Zhuowen shook his head and said, The immeasurable calamity is nothing. With my current strength, it's not difficult for me to block the immeasurable calamity. The calamity I'm talking about is something else. The Abyss Master was shocked. He didn't expect Zhuowen to be so powerful that he could easily block the immeasurable calamity. Back then, in order to resist the immeasurable calamity, they had thought of countless methods, but they were all at their wits' end. However, Zhuowen didn't seem to care about the immeasurable calamity at all. This was too much of a blow. Zhuo Xiaoyu, can you tell me what the calamity is? The Abyss Master asked curiously. I asked you to come here to tell you about this. Zhuowen said with a deep gaze. The Abyss Master's expression immediately became serious. Then, he began to listen carefully to Zhuowen's description of what he had seen and heard in the ancient star system. After listening, he was completely shocked. He didn't expect the high and mighty ancient gods to be in imminent danger and on the verge of extinction. And all of this was because of the ancient celestial demon. In other words, the power of the 3 chosen children can defeat the celestial demon king. Is this true? The Abyss Master calmed down and immediately grasped the key point. It's most likely true. Ma Yujie and I are 2 of them. We haven't found the last one yet, but it's said that he's in the 100 domains. But I think that since Ma Yujie and I have begun to accept the origin source inheritance, perhaps the 3rd chosen child should be similar to us. When the ancient celestial demon really breaks through the ancient star system and marches into the chaotic starry sky, I think fate will arrange it. Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Should we try to find the 3rd chosen child? The Abyss Master pondered for a moment and said. Zhuowen shook his head and said, The heavenly Tao has its own destiny and arrangements. We can't force it. When the time is right, the 3rd one will also appear. The reason I asked you to come here is to ask for your opinion. My great world can still accommodate many people. I plan to take everyone related to me into my great world first, just in case. If you agree, you can take anyone related to you into my great world to take refuge. Zhuowen looked at the Abyss Master and stated his purpose this time. Chapter 48-36. Zhuo Xiaoyu. Can your great world accommodate all the creatures of the 100 domains outside the realm? The Lord of the Abyss asked hopefully. Zhuowen was startled and immediately shook his head. Although his great world had undergone a transformation in the immemorial star system, and the framework of the great world had changed toward the level of the immemorial star system. But after all, it was still a newborn world, and its space was far from being comparable to the immemorial star system and the 100 domains outside the realm. Moreover, the number of creatures in the 100 domains outside the realm was many times more than that of the immemorial gods in the immemorial star system. With the current scale of the great world, it was impossible to accommodate so many creatures in the 100 domains outside the realm. Zhuowen could only choose to bring his close friends into the great world, just in case. After all, he didn't know how long it would take for him to come out of the primordial tree. If the immemorial heavenly demons really breached the sacred star city, then the next step would be to conquer the chaotic starry sky. If he didn't appear in time at that time, then wouldn't the lives of his family and friends be in danger? Zhuowen would never allow such a thing to happen. The Lord of the Abyss looked lonely and sighed. Since it can't accommodate them, I won't enter the great world. After all, I am the Lord of the invincible realm. Not only do I have to take care of the creatures in the Abyss realm, but I also have to take care of the people in the 100 domains outside the realm. If the immemorial heavenly demons really come in advance, I must step forward bravely, and the real top masters of the 100 domains outside the realm must also step forward bravely. If they all leave, who can stop those immemorial heavenly demons? Zhuan took a deep look at the Lord of the Abyss. Although he wanted to say that even if the Lord of the Abyss took action, he couldn't stop them at all. But he knew that even if he tried to persuade the Lord of the Abyss, he might not be able to persuade the Lord of the Abyss. What he could do now was to go to the primordial tree as soon as possible, accept the inheritance of the essence source, and then come out of seclusion as soon as possible to protect the 100 domains outside the realm. This was what he should be doing right now. Come out. There's no need to hide. Suddenly, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the air in front of the hall, and he slowly opened his mouth. Everyone in the hall followed Zhuowen's gaze, their eyes filled with doubt. The direction that Zhuowen was looking at was clearly empty. They couldn't even detect it with their spiritual consciousness. So why did Zhuowen suddenly say something? You're worthy of being the chosen one. I've just arrived and you've already discovered me. I'm afraid your cultivation has already surpassed mine, right? An old voice came from the void in front of the main hall. Then a crack appeared, and an ordinary old man slowly walked out. The old man's aura was extremely powerful, and the power of laws lingered around him. What was even stranger was that the moment the power of laws came into contact with the old man's body, they were all destroyed. It was as if the old man's body contained some kind of destructive power that was comparable to the power of laws and Tao laws. Master Tianju. The Abyss Lord's eyes lit up the moment he saw the old man. He hurriedly walked up and cupped his hands at the old man. Lord Tianju? Could it be the current dean of the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy? Inside the hall, Duan Jipeng, Long Shan, and the others were all discussing spiritedly. They hurriedly got up and looked at Ancestor Tianju with eyes full of respect. Although they had never been in contact with the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy, Ancestor Tianju's name was like thunder to their ears. They knew that the latter was the real #1 master of the 100 territories outside the realm. They didn't expect that the strongest master of the 100 territories outside the realm would actually come to visit. They had to admit that Zhuowen's face was really big. You're too polite, Abyss Lord. Ancestor Tianju waved his hand, and his sharp eyes fell on Zhuowen. He said with a smile, Little friend Zhuowen, I've heard of your name for a long time. Today, I finally get to meet you. Zhuowen smiled slightly, made an inviting gesture with his right hand, and said, Senior Tianju, please take a seat. Ancestor Tianju laughed and sat down on the seat next to Zhuowen. He looked at Zhuowen, and his heart trembled. He had already broken through to the immemorial God realm. In his opinion, no one in the 100 territories outside the realm could surpass him in strength, and no one could make him unable to see through, except for his mysterious master. But now, he couldn't see through the cultivation of the young man in front of him at all. The latter's aura was very mysterious. It seemed to be the same as his, but in fact, it was very different. Zhuo Xiaoyu, I've long heard from the Abyss Lord that you are the destined son of heaven, who will come to save the entire 100 territories outside the realm in the future. Before I saw you, I didn't believe it, but now I believe it. Your realm, I can't see through it. If you don't mind me asking, are you already a mid or high primordial god? Ancestor Tianju stared at Zhuowen with bright eyes. He had cultivated for countless years before he finally broke through to the lower immemorial god. And Zhuowen had only risen for a short time, but his realm had reached a level that he couldn't see through. He was really curious about the former's cultivation. Zhuowen shook his head and said, My realm is the immemorial god realm. It is completely different from the immemorial god and immemorial devil. In other words, the immemorial God realm is the real realm beyond the great carefree realm, beyond the realm of this starry sky. Whether it is the immemorial God or immemorial devil, they are actually a kind of pseudo-realm. Ancestor Tianju was stunned. He didn't expect that Zhuan would say that the immemorial God realm was a pseudo-realm. But how was this possible? His cultivation base and realm had been taught by his master. His master was a supreme existence in the primordial star system. Zhuo Xiaoyu, your joke is not very funny. Ancestor Tianju smiled and didn't believe Zhuowen's words. I heard that your master is an immemorial god who fell from the immemorial stars. Is his name Julian? Zhuan looked at Ancestor Tianju and asked faintly. Ancestor Tianju's pupils shrank slightly, and he looked at Zhuan in disbelief and said, How do you know my master's name? His master's name was a real taboo. Back then, when his master had taught the 5 of them, he had warned them not to reveal his name, and had made them swear an oath. It could be said that in the entire 100 domains, only the 5 of them really knew his master's name. After so many years, the other 4 had fallen, and he was the only one left, so no one knew his master's name. But how did Zhuan know? I have been to the immemorial stars and met Julian's father, the imperial god of Zhen constellation. Zhuan said slowly. Ancestor Tianju only felt an explosion in his mind and looked at Zhuan in disbelief. The imperial god of Zhen constellation, he had heard of it before. It was a name that his master often mentioned when he was alive. He had asked his master before. His master only said that this person was his father, and he had let his father down, and then he didn't say much. At this moment, Ancestor Tianju already believed everything Zhuowen said. Chapter 48-37. Zhuo Xiaoyu. So you disappeared for more than 100 years because you went to the immemorial star galaxy? Ancestor Tianju was extremely smart and immediately thought of where Zhuowen had been all these years. Yes. I experienced a lot of things in the immemorial star galaxy. Now the 100 territories and even the entire chaotic starry sky are facing a great calamity that is far more terrifying than the immeasurable calamity. Zhuowen nodded and told him everything about the immemorial heavenly demon. Ancestor Tianju was not surprised by the heavenly demon that Zhuowen mentioned. Obviously, he should have heard about it from Julian a long time ago. It was just that he didn't expect that the immemorial heavenly demon was so powerful that it almost drove the immemorial god to the brink of extinction. If it weren't for the inaction of the 4 leaders of the immemorial god would not have been forced to this point by the immemorial heavenly demon. Zhuowen shook his head and sighed. Ancestor Tianju suddenly stood up solemnly and immediately bowed deeply to Zhuowen. Senior Tianju. You are. Zhuowen stepped forward and wanted to help Ancestor Tianju up, but the latter shook his head. Zhuo Xiaoyu, I thank you on behalf of all the creatures in the 100 territories. The immemorial heavenly demon is so powerful that only you and the other 2 heaven's chosen sons can resist it. In the future, the entire chaotic starry sky will rely on you. When Ancestor Tianju knew that even Julian's father, the star god of Zhen constellation, was far from being a match for the heavenly demon king, he understood how terrifying the heavenly demon king was. Now, the only hope of the chaotic starry sky was Zhuowen and the other 2 heaven's chosen sons. Zhuowen's eyes were complicated, and he sighed softly, Senior Tianju, you are too polite. Even if you didn't say it, I would have made the same choice. And since you are here, then I will teach you what the real immemorial realm is. Ancestor Tianju's pupils shrank, and he said excitedly, Really? Zhuowen nodded and said, Yes. Right now, you are the most powerful person in the outer regions. If the heavenly devil or the immeasurable calamity really comes and I can't make it in time, only you can step forward bravely. As he spoke, Jun looked at the Lord of the Abyss and said with a smile, Senior Lord of the Abyss, you should also come with me these few days. I will also impart this method to you. The Lord of the Abyss was so excited that he hurriedly cupped his hands and bowed, saying, Thank you, Zhuo Xiaoyu. Over the next few days, Forefather Tianju and the Lord of the Deep Abyss basically stayed in the Kanglin's sacred temple. Although Zhuowen was cultivating the true Archean realm method, The deep abyss didn't have much time left. Ever since Zhuowen had broken through, he had formed a faint connection with the primordial Hongmeng tree. The primordial Hongmeng tree's power and information were continuously transmitted into his mind through the primordial Hongmeng stone, allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of the primordial realm. Now that he knew about old ancestor Tianju and the Abyss Master, it was naturally more than enough. After interacting with Zhuowen for the past few days, Patriarch Tianju and the Lord of the Deep Abyss were full of admiration for him. Zhuowen's explanation about the Archean realm could be said to be enlightening for them. After listening to Zhuowen's words for the past few days, they were enlightened and had a new understanding of the Archean realm. What surprised them even more was that the cultivation method Zhuowen passed on to them was the complete version of the primordial Hongmeng technique, which was a true cultivation method that could lead to the Archean realm. After old ancestor Tianju and the Lord of the Deep Abyss bade farewell to Zhun, Hun followed the Lord of the Deep Abyss to the Abyss realm. Jin Ao had already decided to move the dragon tribe to Zhuowen's macro world and learn from Zhu Huang. As for the grudge between the dragon tribe and the Lord of the Deep Abyss, it was temporarily put aside. Whether they would settle their grudge in the future was their own business. Zhuowen couldn't interfere and wouldn't meddle in other people's business. In the Abyss realm, Zhuowen stood in the air with the Lord of the Deep Abyss standing beside him. Lord Dan Zhen and Bai Shuyuan stood on both sides while Zhu Huang and Jin Ao stood behind. The dragon tribe was finally going to be liberated. Jin Ao looked at the gradually disappearing pool below with excitement in his eyes. This pool was an extremely powerful restriction that imprisoned countless dragon tribe members in the abyss, never to come out. Dragon roars came from the abyss and then huge true dragons rushed out of the abyss. Terrifying dragon power poured out and tore the surrounding space into cracks. Our dragon tribe is finally going to see the light of day. This is the feeling of freedom. Long live the Dragon King. Long live Lord Zhu Huang. Countless true dragons flew over and surrounded Zhuowen, the Lord of the Deep Abyss, and the others. Pairs of dragon eyes fell on Jin Ao and Zhu Huang. Greetings, Lord Zhu Huang. Countless true dragons lowered their heads and bowed to Zhu Huang. Zhu Huang said indifferently, "The one you should be greeting the most is not me, but Tim. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be alive. If it wasn't for him, you wouldn't be able to leave this damn place." Countless true dragons looked at each other before their eyes fell on the young man standing at the front. Although they were still hesitant, they still obediently lowered their heads to Zhu. Their dragon eyes were full of respect. Zhuowen's expression was calm. He waved his sleeve and opened the entrance to the great world. A huge vortex appeared in the void above. "This is the entrance to my great world. I don't know what Jin Ao told you. If you're willing to believe me, then enter my great world. If you don't, I won't force you," Zhuowen said calmly. Countless true dragons looked at each other and let out dragon roars. Then they rushed into the sky and entered the vortex. In the blink of an eye, all the true dragons disappeared into the vortex. "Zhuo Xiaoyu. Thank you." A smile appeared on Zhu Huang's face as he cupped his hands toward Zhuowen in thanks. "Lord Zhu Huang, let's enter the great world too." Jin Ao also expressed his gratitude and looked at Zhu Huang. "Go in." "I won't go in." Zhu Huang shook his head. "Lord Zhu Huang, what do you mean?" Jin Ao's expression changed slightly. "Zhuo Xiaoyu has helped our dragon tribe so much. I can't let him work for nothing. He saved the dragon tribe, so I have to repay him. I will stay in the 100 territories and protect the living beings here." Zhu Huang looked at Zhuowen with a serious gaze. Zhuowen was stunned. He didn't expect Zhu Huang to suddenly make such a decision. However, he didn't say anything. Zhu Huang was very powerful. He was a high-class primordial god. Moreover, he had taught him the cultivation method of the primordial realm. Zhu Huang was far stronger than Tianju. With him in the 100 territories, there was indeed a lot of protection. "Lord Zhu Huang." Jin Ao's face was filled with anxiety. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by Zhu Huang. "Jin Ao, the person must know how to be grateful. It was the same for a dragon. You have also received great kindness from Zhuo Xiaoyu today. You must repay him well in the future. Go in. Zhu Huang said solemnly. Jin Ao didn't dare to disobey Zhu Huang's orders and could only enter the great world. However, he remembered Zhu Huang's words word for word. Chapter 48:38. When all the dragon tribe in the Abyss secret realm had entered the great world, Huan waved his sleeve and closed the entrance to the great world. Senior Zhu Huang, do you really intend to stay? Zhuan looked at the middle-aged scholar in front of him and pondered for a moment before asking in a deep voice. A smile hung on the corners of Zhu Huang's mouth as he said, I've never gone back on my decision. Moreover, I can't leave everything to you. After all, I am a senior. If I let a junior take on most of the responsibility, wouldn't I be too incompetent as a senior? Hearing this, Yuan smiled slightly and did not say anything. He respected Zhu Huang's decision from the bottom of his heart. Senior Zhu Huang, this matter is over. I am preparing to head to the primordial Hongmeng tree. You can stay in the Abyss realm from now on. Yuan looked at Zhu Huang and said, Abyss Master, I will leave Senior Zhu Huang in your care. Zhuan looked at the Abyss Master again. Zhou Xiaoyu, what are you saying? I will be indebted to Senior Zhu Huang for taking care of me in the future. The Abyss Master hurriedly said. Zhuan nodded and said, Friends, farewell. We will meet again on the battlefield. As he spoke, Zhuowen lightly stomped his foot. Waves of ripples appeared in the air, and Zhuowen disappeared. Qi Huan Realm. Zhuan broke through the void and appeared in the sky above Qi Huan Realm. Looking down at the bustling cities and countless people, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with emotion. Qi Huan Realm was just a low-level realm in the past. How long had it been since then? It had transformed into a high-level realm. Zhuan knew that all of this was brought about by Zhuojunan and the Ryuka behind him. Otherwise, Qi Huan Realm would not have developed so quickly. When Zhuan landed in Qi Huan Realm, he leisurely stepped into the busy streets and looked at the bustling scene around him. Zhuan nodded in his heart. Zhuojunan was indeed his son. After becoming the domain lord of the Qi Huan domain, he had not expected him to be able to manage the domain so well. Although Zhuan was leisurely walking on the street, the people on the street turned a blind eye to him. It was as if Zhuowen did not exist. Especially when someone walked in front of Zhuowen, some kind of order suddenly appeared in the person's mind, and he subconsciously avoided Zhuowen. This person felt strange in advance, so he turned his head to look behind him. However, he did not find anything. He just patted his head in annoyance and continued to move forward. This phenomenon was not an isolated case. Along the way, Zhuan did not know how many people had this strange phenomenon. Before long, Zhuan reached the end of the street and stepped into the central hall of the city. The central hall of Qi Huan God City was heavily guarded. After Zhuowen entered the central hall, the guards turned a blind eye to him. It was as if Zhuowen was just a lump of air that they couldn't see clearly. Little master, don't run around. Be careful not to hurt yourself. Suddenly, in the central hall, several beautiful maids rushed out with anxious faces. These maids' cultivation was not bad. They turned into several streams of light, and their speed was extremely fast. However, the child in front of them was even faster. His entire body was emitting a mysterious purple gold light, and he was laughing. Come and chase me. If you can catch me, I will listen to you. If you can't catch me, I won't listen to anyone. A childish voice came from the purple gold light. Zhuan looked over and found that inside the purple gold light was a little boy of about 5 or 6 years old. The little boy was chubby. He only wore a doo-doo, and his hair was tied up in 2 pigtails. His skin was white and rosy, and he looked very cute. People could not help but want to take a bite out of him. The moment Zhuowen saw the little boy, he was immediately happy. In the unseen world, he felt the bloodline connection in the little boy's body. He immediately understood that this little boy was his grandson, Zhuojunan's child. That little fellow Jun, why didn't he tell me that he had a grandson? Moreover, he didn't report it to Chen Shui. Truly. Zhuan shook his head. Although his mouth was filled with complaints, his face was filled with a happy smile. Come and chase me. Ha ha, you can't catch me. The little boy's little feet kept kicking in the air as purple gold light kept surging out of his body, increasing his speed by a few notches. Although the maid's cultivation was not bad, even if they used all their skills, they still could not catch up to the little boy. They could only shout at the little boy to make him stop. "You can't even catch me, so why should I listen to you? Stop." The little boy giggled as his little feet moved even faster. Suddenly, the little boy bumped into a figure and gave a painful cry as he sat down on the ground. "You. For you." The little boy sat on the ground and raised his head. His pair of crystal clear and beautiful gem-like eyes looked at the young man standing in front of him and asked curiously. The young man in front of him was unfamiliar to him. He was sure that he had never seen this person in the core divine temple of Qi Huan Holy City. One should know that his father had told him that the core divine temple was the most heavily guarded place in the Qi Huan region and it was impossible for an outsider to break in. He had lived in the core divine temple since he was born and he knew everyone in the core divine temple. However, he had never seen the young man in front of him before. Could this person not be from the core divine temple? Then why would he appear in the core divine temple? Moreover, the little boy realized that although he had never seen the young man in front of him before, he felt a strange sense of familiarity. He had felt this feeling from his father, Zhuojun. It was an indescribable connection deep in his blood. "You. For you. You're not from the core divine temple." When the little boy stopped, the maids who were chasing him immediately caught up and protected the little boy behind them. They looked at the unfamiliar young man in front of them with vigilance. Clang, 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 clang. The guards around the core divine temple were suddenly awakened. They rushed over with spears in their hands and surrounded the young man. The unfamiliar young man who suddenly appeared was none other than Zhuo. "How dare you break into the core divine temple of Qi Huan Holy City? This is the forbidden area of Qi Huan Holy City." A burly man with a vigorous aura, who was obviously the captain of the guards, came out at this moment and looked at Zhuo with vigilance. "Stop it!" Suddenly, the little boy shouted. The guards with spears in their hands paused. Then, the little boy suddenly turned into a purple gold streamer, broke through the encirclement, and floated in front of Zhuo. "You give me a familiar feeling." "For you?" the little boy asked crisply. "My name is Zhuo," Zhuo said slowly. His voice was very soft, but there was some kind of strange energy that silently transmitted to the minds of everyone present. Finally, the voice transmitted farther and farther and finally alarmed the creatures in the surrounding divine temples, including Zhuojun An's bedroom. Chapter 48-39. Father is here. I have to inform Qi Lin and have her come with me to pay respects to Father. Zhuojun An's eyes shone with excitement as he took out his communication jade talisman and sent a message to Qi Lin. Mu Chenxue had already informed him of Zhuowen's return. Originally, he had planned to take Qi Lin and his son to the Kanglan domain to visit Zhuowen after a period of time and give Zhuowen a surprise while he was at it, but he did not expect that Zhuowen had already come to his side in advance. "Jun, you don't need to inform me, I already know. Father's voice is also ringing in my head." Just as Zhuojun An sent out the message, a beautiful young woman walked in from outside the palace with a sweet smile on her face. "Ah, Qi Lin, you've come back just in time. Come with me to pay respects to Father." Zhuojun An hurried forward and grabbed Qi Lin's slender hand as he spoke excitedly. Qi Lin rolled her eyes at Zhuojun An and said, "Are you going to meet Father dressed like this?" Only then did Zhuojun An realize that his upper body was still bare and he was only wearing a pair of large underpants. "I was too happy and neglected it. Isn't this because I'm used to dressing like this in front of you? I'll change my clothes now." Zhuojun An scratched his head and hurried into the inner room. Qi Lin pouted coquettishly as her beautiful cheeks flushed red. After a while, Zhuojun An changed into a new set of clothes and led Qi Lin out of the palace and towards the core palace. At this moment, in the core palace, whether it was the maids or the guards, they were all dumbstruck as they looked at Zhuowen in disbelief. Of course, they knew the name Zhuowen. Moreover, it was like thunder in their ears. Not to mention the great things that Zhuowen had done that shook the entire 100 domains. Just the fact that Zhuowen was Zhuojun An's father was not someone they could casually offend. So it's Lord Zhuowen. We have offended you just now, please forgive us. All the maids and guards knelt on the ground and bowed their heads, respectfully apologizing to Zhuowen. Your name is Zhuowen? It's the same as my grandfather's name. The little boy floated in front of Zhuowen and put his chubby little hand on his lips. Ha! I'm your grandfather. Zhuowen laughed and gently hugged the little boy in his arms. Strangely enough, the naughty little boy was exceptionally quiet in front of Zhuowen. Furthermore, he did not resist Zhuowen's embrace. He even felt an inexplicable sense of tranquility. What's your name? Zhuowen asked with a smile. My name is Zhuowudi. The little boy chuckled. Zhuowen was stunned. His gaze was exceptionally strange as he asked, Did your father give you this name? Zhuowudi shook his head and said, No. My original name was Zhuohong. Later on, my father kept telling me stories about my grandfather. He said that my grandfather would be invincible in the 100 domains in the future. Then I felt that the name Wudi was very good, so I changed it myself. Zhuowen was amused. This Zhuowudi was a clown. He actually changed his name on his own accord. Then did your parents acknowledge your name? Zhuowen laughed. They didn't acknowledge it at first. They even said that the name was too shameful. I refused to accept it, so I shouted, I am Zhuowudi, in the entire temple and other halls. Then almost everyone in the Qi Huan God City knew that I was Zhuowudi. When everyone acknowledged my name as Zhuowudi, didn't I become Zhuowudi? Zhuowudi's bright eyes revealed a crafty look. However, Zhuowen laughed. It seemed that his grandson was a little interesting. Not only did he change his name, but he also came up with such a clever way to force Zhuojunan and the others to acknowledge Zhuowudi's new name. While Zhuowen and Zhuowudi were talking and laughing, outside the core temple, two streams of light came together and landed not far from Zhuowen. Greetings, Lord Junan and Madam Qi Lin. When the maids and guards who were kneeling around saw the couple rushing over, they lowered their heads even more and said respectfully in unison. Zhuojunan and Qi Lin ignored the maids and guards. Instead, their eyes were completely focused on the young man who was holding Zhuowudi. Father! Zhuojunan and Qi Lin shouted in unison and hurried over to greet them. Father, mother. Zhuowudi, who was in Zhuowen's arms, quickly broke free from Zhuowen's embrace and ran toward Zhuojunan and Qi Lin. Zhuowen did not stop him. He only smiled as he watched Qi Lin hold Zhuowudi in her arms. Junan, what you've done isn't honorable at all. You gave birth to a son and you didn't even tell me. Zhuowen looked at Zhuojunan and said with some dissatisfaction. Zhuojunan scratched his head in embarrassment and said, Father, I just wanted to give you a surprise. Some time ago, when I received news from Mother, Qi Lin and I were preparing to go to Kanglin Domain. I didn't expect you to come to Qi Huan Domain personally. I've sinned. Zhuowen patted Zhuojunan's head and scolded jokingly, You say you've sinned, but I don't think you feel guilty at all. Father, you've wronged me. I do feel a little guilty. Zhuojunan chuckled. Zhuowen shook his head and stopped fooling around with Zhuojunan. Instead, he said seriously, I've come here because I have something important to tell you. Zhuojunan saw that Zhuowen was so serious, and his gaze also became serious. He nodded and said, I understand. Father, let's talk inside the temple. Under Zhuojunan's lead, Zhuowen, Qi Lin, and Zhuowudi all entered the temple. The maids and guards kneeling outside the temple heaved a sigh of relief, and only then did they dare to stand up. Especially the guards, their backs were already soaked in cold sweat. They knew Zhuowen's deeds like the back of their hands and knew how powerful he was. It could be said that Zhuowen could crush all of them with a single finger. Inside the temple, under Zhuojunan's lead, Zhuowen sat on the main seat. Zhuojunan sat below Zhuowen, and below him was Qi Lin, who was holding Zhuowudi. Father, you look so serious. Do you have something important to tell me? Zhuojunan looked at Zhuowen and asked. This is very important. It concerns the life and death of the 100 domains. Zhuowen said seriously. Is it about the immeasurable calamity? Zhuojunan asked. He had long heard about the immeasurable calamity and knew that Jun was the chosen one in the prophecy of the great speech soul master. In the future, he would save countless lives in the 100 domains. It's more serious than that, Zhuowen said seriously. Zhuo Junan's pupils shrank. He sat down solemnly, but his heart was shocked. He did not expect that the 100 domains would have a calamity more serious than the immeasurable calamity. Chapter 4840. Apart from the immeasurable calamity, what other calamities will there be in the outer domains? Zhuo Jun was puzzled. From what he knew, the immeasurable calamity was the most terrifying calamity in the entire chaotic galaxy. It was enough to destroy all life. If that was the case, what kind of calamity would be even more terrifying than the immeasurable calamity? He simply could not imagine it. It's a long story. It's related to the immemorial star system. Zhuowen let out a sigh. He told Qi Nen everything he had seen and heard in the ancient star galaxy. After hearing this, Zhuo Jun and Qi Lin fell into silence. Their faces were filled with fear and shock. Only Zhuo Wudi, who was too young to understand these things, was staring at Zhuo Wen and Zhuo Junan with a pair of sparkling, gem-like eyes. He looked at Zhuo Wen and then at Zhuo Junan with a doubtful expression. The immemorial heavenly demons are so terrifying that even the immemorial gods are about to be wiped out? Zhuo Jun was silent for a long time before he finally recovered. He opened his mouth and spoke with a trembling voice. He did not know much about the immemorial star system, but he knew that it was high above the chaotic galaxy for countless years. It was a sacred place that countless life forms in the chaotic galaxy yearned to enter. As for the primordial gods that lived in the primordial star system, they were unreachable and powerful existences in his eyes. He did not expect that the mysterious and powerful immemorial gods would be forced to wipe out their race. Father, do you mean that after the immemorial heavenly demons completely destroy the last star city of the immemorial gods, they will invade the chaotic galaxy? Qi Lin's beautiful eyes flashed as she thought of something. Zhuowen nodded and said, "When the nest is destroyed, there will be no eggs left intact. If the immemorial gods are finished, the chaotic galaxy will also be destroyed. I came here today to bring you into my parallel world. The Ryuka are now in the parallel world." Zhuo Jun thought about it and did not hesitate for long before he agreed to Zhuowen's request. Next, Zhuo Jun and Qi Lin began to arrange the management of the Qi Huan realm. They also promoted a large number of core people to govern the Qi Huan realm together. Zhuo Jun and Qi Lin brought the important people into the parallel world. After everything was ready, Zhuowen and Zhuo Jun floated in the air above the Qi Huan realm and looked down at the mountains and rivers below. "Father, I'm the realm lord of the Qi Huan realm. Isn't it a little?" Zhuo Jun couldn't help but ask. Zhuowen patted Zhuo Jun's shoulder and said with a faint smile, "Life and death are determined by fate, and riches and honor are determined by the heavens. I brought all of you into the great world just in case. It's also for my own peace of mind. Only then can I accept the primordial Hong tree's inheritance with peace of mind." Zhuo Jun nodded. He wasn't afraid of death. His thoughts were similar to Zhuowen's. Zhuowen was now the hope of the 100 domains. He couldn't let Zhuowen have any psychological burden because of him. Furthermore, there was still some time before the immemorial heavenly demons and the immeasurable calamity arrived. If Zhuowen could come out of seclusion quickly, he would be able to make it out before the immemorial heavenly demons invaded. "Let's go." Yun glanced at Zhuo Junan. The latter looked down reluctantly before stepping into the whirlpool at the entrance of the large world. "After all, you are related to Junan. If the calamity really comes, this array will lend you a helping hand." Zhuowen formed a seal with both hands and struck out. Mysterious purple array runes swept out and instantly covered the entire Qi Huan realm. Now that Zhuowen had successfully entered the immemorial realm and grasped the power of all things in the world, the array he set up was far stronger than the one in the chaotic starry sky. Although this array wasn't as powerful as the ones he left in the Abyss realm and Kanglan realm, it was still extremely powerful. It wouldn't have a problem blocking the low-level immemorial heavenly demons. After doing all this, Yuan stepped lightly into the void and disappeared on the spot like a puff of green smoke. The primordial Hong tree was connected to the entire chaotic starry sky. Its roots were at the bottom of the chaotic starry sky, and the top of the tree was at the height of the immemorial star. It was mysterious and distant. Suddenly, a ray of flowing light cut through the starry sky like a bright and unique comet. It crossed the starry sky and landed on a thick treetop in the middle of the primordial Hong tree. The primordial Hong Meng tree seemed to have sensed something the moment a figure landed on the treetop. Countless treetops shook as mysterious purple leaves drifted over and circled around the person. They seemed to be extremely happy. This person was none other than Zhuan. "Sorry to keep you waiting." Zhuan looked at the purple leaves surrounding him and smiled. Although the primordial Hong tree couldn't speak, it had its own way of expressing itself. The purple leaves seemed to understand Zhuo Wen's words and became even more excited. The leaves around Zhuo Wen became even more cheerful, and their spinning speed also became faster and faster. However, the strange thing was that although the purple leaves spun so fast, there was no sound of wind at all. Yet, it gave Zhuo Wen a warm and comfortable feeling. The purple leaves spun faster and faster. In the end, only afterimages could be seen. The space around Zhuo Wen gradually distorted, becoming crooked. In the end, Zhuo Wen and the purple leaves disappeared from the treetop. When Zhuo Wen opened his eyes, he discovered that he was standing in a very strange space. The environment in this space was very similar to a starry sky. However, this starry sky was not pitch black like an ordinary starry sky. Instead, it was suffused with a mysterious purple light. In this purple starry sky, what was dotted with were not stars, but enormous purple trees. The purple light came from the countless leaves of the huge purple trees. In this starry sky, there were many huge purple trees. They were like countless stars, constantly twinkling in the starry sky. Moreover, they were not far apart from each other. At a glance, it was like a purple forest that covered the entire purple starry sky. "Where is this?" Zhuan looked at the huge purple trees around him, his eyes full of curiosity. "This is the real space of the primordial Hong Meng tree." A faintly discernible voice slowly rang out from the space and lingered in Zhuo Wen's ears. Then, Zhuo Wen was shocked to find that the countless purple leaves around him had suddenly condensed into a huge arrowhead. The arrow was pointing in the direction of the deepest part of the purple forest. "It seems that these leaves that followed me in are showing me the way. I wonder what's in the depths of this forest?" Zhuan looked thoughtful. He lifted his right foot and walked into the depths of the forest. The structure of the purple forest was extremely complicated. It twisted and turned, twisting and turning. If not for the purple leaves following him and showing him the way, one might have been completely lost in this forest. Finally, Huan reached the depths of the purple forest. He stopped and the arrow formed by the leaves completely dissipated. "This is..." Huan looked forward and his pupils could not help but shrink. Chapter 48-41. In the deepest part of the purple forest stood a small, purple-gold sapling that was only as tall as a person. This small sapling paled in comparison to the surrounding giant trees. There was no comparison at all. However, the sapling's aura was far more powerful than the surrounding trees. It was even more powerful and mysterious than the entire purple forest. The sapling's aura was profound and unfathomable. It gave people a very strange feeling. Zhuan had felt this feeling before. It was the purple-gold divine crown that floated above the primordial space of the ancient godly kings. The purple-gold divine crown was the essence of the form origin. Since the sapling's aura was similar to the purple-gold divine crown, it meant that the sapling was the essence of the substance origin. Suddenly, the purple-gold sapling in front of him moved. That movement was like a stretch. A mysterious purple-gold leaf fell down and appeared in Zhuo Wen's palm. Huan was stunned. He was clearly very far away from the sapling, but the leaf that fell from the sapling had actually appeared in his palm. This should be some kind of hint. The moment the purple-gold leaf touched Zhuo Wen's palm, Zhuo Wen suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. Then his feet involuntarily walked towards the purple-gold sapling. In the end, Zhuan arrived in front of the sapling. His right hand involuntarily touched the sapling. In that instant, Zhuowen's mind seemed to explode. Countless pieces of information poured into Zhuowen's mind like a flood. Zhuowen seemed to have a very, very long dream. In the dream, he seemed to have returned to the beginning of the world. He witnessed the changes of the world from the perspective of a god. At the beginning of the world, there was no sky or earth. There was only a boundless, indistinguishable primordial chaos. There were only 3 kinds of matter in this primordial chaos. These 3 kinds of matter were qi, form, and substance. They were the ultimate energies of the primordial chaos. After an unknown amount of time, the 3 ultimate energies of qi, form, and substance suddenly became uncoordinated. They began to rapidly collide and interact with each other. In the end, it led to an unprecedented explosion. This explosion lasted for an unknown number of years. It spread throughout the primordial chaos. The terrifying energy seemed to be able to tear apart the primordial chaos, turning it upside down. When the explosion gradually died down, after an unknown amount of time, the primordial chaos that was like a ball of dough finally separated. When the primordial chaos separated, qi spread throughout the primordial chaos, turning into all kinds of energy, such as spiritual qi, yuan qi, divine power, and so on. The essence of these energies was qi. The reason why there was a difference was due to the amount of qi contained within. It floated up and hung at the highest point of the chaotic starry sky, forming an ancient star that had existed for eternity. As for the essence, it sank down to the very bottom of the starry sky. It took root and sprouted, growing into an archaic hongmeng tree that connected the heavens and the earth. As for the 3 ultimate origin powers, the 3 worlds formed by the 3 ultimate origin powers all gave birth to the corresponding living beings. The primordial chaos tree grew countless starry sky fruits. Each starry sky fruit contained an endless number of worlds, giving birth to countless primitive living beings. Later on, countless races were born. The qi of the primordial chaos formed many realms, scattered in every corner of the universe, giving birth to powerful living beings. Of course, although these living beings were not as numerous as the living beings of the starry sky fruits of the primordial chaos tree, they had a much higher starting point and were much stronger. The primordial star gave birth to the primordial supreme being, and the primordial supreme being created countless primordial gods. The primordial gods were the most powerful beings in this world. At the same time, they also had the authority to manage countless living beings. However, among the living beings born from the 3 ultimate energies, the one with the most potential was the living beings of the primordial chaos tree. Over countless years, the living beings born from the starry sky fruits of the primordial chaos tree gave birth to countless civilizations. There would be a small number of true geniuses in each civilization. These geniuses would break through the shackles of the starry sky fruits, step into the primordial chaos, and enter the realms. Among these geniuses, there would be a small number of them who would cultivate and become the top powerhouses of their respective realms. They would then ascend to the highest level of the primordial star system. If it were not for the accident in the primordial star system, those geniuses who came out of the starry sky fruits would definitely have a place in the primordial star system. Zhuan looked at the evolution of this world quietly, and there was a look of enlightenment in the depths of his eyes. This was because he possessed a great world, and this great world was constantly changing. Moreover, it was changing according to his cultivation and his comprehension. When he saw the true evolution of the primordial chaos, he had a lot of enlightenment. Then, Zhuan began to experience the evolution of the living beings in this world. Zhuan looked at the evolution of the living beings in the primordial chaos tree and the primordial chaos. There were not many surprises in these 2 places, and it was not much different from what he had imagined. Only in the primordial star system, Zhuowen's soul followed the power of the primordial chaos tree and wandered around the primordial star system. He saw the birth of the primordial god king, and also saw the primordial god king expending his own blood essence to create the primordial god and the 28 constellation gods. He also saw the four chiefs not being disciplined and taking advantage of the primordial god king's weakness to attack him. After the primordial god king passed away, the four paragons completely grasped the true authority of the primordial star system. They exercised the authority of the primordial god kings without restraint, abusing their authority and managing the primordial star system into a complete mess. Many primordial gods were filled with resentment. Their lives were miserable, and the various constellation gods had split up the primordial stars to fight for themselves. The years of war and the inaction of the management caused the entire primordial god king to fall into an abyss of suffering. Zhuan finally understood what the so-called immeasurable calamity was. It turned out that it was a method used by the primordial gods to suppress the living beings in the lower realms. As the living beings in the lower realms continued to ascend into the primordial star system, the four chiefs also felt a lot of pressure. They were worried that these living beings in the lower realms would shake their authority. Therefore, they arbitrarily changed the conditions for ascension and constantly oppressed those who ascended from the lower realms, causing them to be unable to continue to develop. They could only struggle at death's door in the primordial star system and live without dignity. What was even more despicable was that the four chiefs sent down the immeasurable calamity to deliberately destroy the top domain civilizations in the primordial star system. For example, the destroyed Master God realm had many powerhouses who were not weaker than the primordial gods. If they were allowed to develop, they could really become stronger and threaten the primordial star system. Therefore, the four chiefs deliberately sent down the immeasurable calamity to completely destroy the Master God realm. Examples like this in the Overgod domain were simply too numerous to mention. The immeasurable calamity had destroyed countless top-notch and prosperous civilizations like this. Chapter 48-42. Zhuowen's expression turned ugly. He did not expect the truth of the immeasurable cataclysm to be like this. The four leaders were really despicable. Why is the primordial tree showing me these things? Does it want me to comprehend or find out something from them? Zhuowen looked at the images that were flashing past his eyes with a strange expression. At the same time, he only saw the harsh governance of the four leaders of the immemorial star system and the inaction of many constellation gods over the countless years. What made Zhuowen even more puzzled was that he still had not discovered the origin of the primordial heavenly demons. The images he saw now were of the immemorial gods fighting each other in the immemorial star system. The four leaders would also use the immeasurable cataclysm to target the lower realms from time to consolidate their divine authority. The Tao of heaven is to take away the excess and make up for the deficiency. The Tao of man is different. Who can take care of the world with excess? Only the Tao can. Suddenly, a solemn and dignified voice came from the void and rushed into Zhuowen's mind, exploding in his mind. The primordial stones in Zhuowen's body buzzed and then rushed out of his body. They floated above his head and spun rapidly, emitting a mysterious purple light. At the same time, mysterious purple leaves appeared out of thin air around Zhuowen and started to enter his body. These purple leaves are controlling my body. Zhuowen's expression changed greatly because he realized that he had lost control of his body the moment the purple leaves entered his body. The purple leaves were controlling his body. Soon after, Zhuowen discovered to his astonishment that the devil domain hidden within his body had actually opened up. Layer by layer, terrifying and blazing devil chi surged out, tainting the surroundings with an inky black color. Not good. The 18th level of the demon realm is opening. Zhuowen's expression changed greatly. Looking at the demon realm opening up layer by layer, Yun roared and kept urging his divine power to resist the power of the purple leaves. But what made him despair was that the difference between the two was too great. The more he struggled, the more powerless he became. The 18th level of the infernal domain imprisoned the extremely mysterious demonic neonate. The more Zhuowen cultivated, the more he felt how terrifying demonic neonate was. Especially during this period of time, demonic neonate had become stronger with him. Even though he had broken through to the primordial realm, he was still somewhat fearful of this demon nascent soul because he still couldn't see through it. He had originally planned to get rid of the demon infant once and for all after receiving the primordial stone's inheritance. However, he had never expected that he would be forced to release the demon infant under the influence of the primordial tree's power. Roar, roar, roar. In the 18th level of the demon zone, there was an infant with ink-black skin that was bound by countless chains. The infant was letting out terrifying screams, causing people's hearts to tremble. The terrifying demonic might was like a monstrous tsunami, sweeping up a cloud of dust. Damn it. Zhuowen's veins popped as he used all his strength. He finally began to move, but at that moment, the countless chains on demonic neonate's body completely shattered. Come here. Zhuowen roared as his right hand grabbed out, condensing a huge hand that grabbed at the falling demonic neonate. The demonic neonate opened its huge demonic eyes and looked at Zhuowen quietly. Its eyes were filled with complicated emotions. When, to Zhuowen's horror, the moment his divine power hand grabbed demonic neonate, it was shattered inch by some mysterious force. Then, a force kept dragging Zhuowen upwards. It was as if a hand was dragging his body. Demonic neonate continued to sink, chasing after the primordial star system in the long river of time. To be more precise, it was falling towards the primordial star system countless years ago. Zhuowen rose higher and higher until he finally left the world of the primordial star system and reached the highest point. The moment he looked down, he saw many long rivers of time. Each river of time was something that had happened in the primordial star system in different periods. At the end of the long river of time, countless primordial heavenly demon armies pressed against Sacred Star City and began their general attack. The heavenly demon king hovered above the countless heavenly demon armies and silently looked down at the gods and demons who were fighting. His eyes were cold and ruthless. Suddenly, the heavenly demon king seemed to sense something and turned his head to look at Zhuowen. His pupils constricted as he muttered softly. At that moment, Zhuowen finally understood something. It turned out that the heavenly demon king's predecessor was demonic neonate, and demonic neonate was the heavenly demon king. Although Zhuowen's body kept rising, he immediately looked at the node of the long river of time where demonic neonate had fallen. Sure enough, after demonic neonate fell into the primordial star system at that time node, he cleverly hid and began to improve silently. What was even more terrifying was that as demonic neonate's strength continued to increase, he possessed more and more power as if he was born with it. At the same time, demonic neonate began to pollute the primordial gods he had killed with demonic chi, turning them into primordial heavenly demons. Of course, demonic neonate's experiment failed at the beginning, but after continuous experiments, he finally succeeded. More and more primordial heavenly demons appeared, and their scale grew larger and larger. In the beginning, there weren't many primordial heavenly demons, so the constellation gods didn't care at all. They continued to fight and attack, causing countless bloody massacres and piles of corpses. And these primordial gods' corpses happened to be the best carriers for the heavenly demons. Demonic neonate began to order the heavenly demons to quietly collect the corpses of the primordial gods on the battlefield and pollute them with demonic chi. Just like that, the number of primordial heavenly demons increased exponentially. By the time the primordial gods realized that something was wrong, the primordial heavenly demons had already become a force to be reckoned with. Damn it! Primordial tree, are you trying to kill so many primordial gods in the entire primordial star system? Do you also want to kill countless living beings in the 100 outer regions? Aren't you being too selfish? Zhuowen roared loudly. If the problem really did lie with demonic neonate, then wouldn't he be the main culprit? This is a predestined tribulation, a predetermined trajectory. It's difficult for you and me to change it. In this world, strength, emotions, wisdom, and so on are not necessary. Only balance is the true essence of this world. Suddenly, an ancient voice slowly sounded out. Zhuowen only felt the world spin. He'd already left the endless river of time and arrived at a mysterious space that was enshrouded in violet chi. In this mysterious space, only an area of nearly 1,000 square meters was clearly visible. There stood a small wooden house, and beside the wooden house was a small stream. In the middle of the wooden house and the stream, a haggard old man was leisurely fishing by the stream. Chapter 48-43. Who are you? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice as he looked at the old man fishing by the stream. His eyes revealed a look of vigilance. The old man smiled faintly and said, "You can call me Hong Meng. At the same time, I am also the most loyal servant of the primordial Hong Meng tree. I was born with the primordial Hong Meng tree the moment it was born. For countless years, I have been taking care of the primordial Hong Meng tree. Otherwise, the fruits of the primordial Hong Meng tree wouldn't have grown so well." Hong Meng. Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he muttered to himself. He didn't expect that the old man in front of him was born with the primordial Hong Meng tree. Wouldn't that mean that this old man was on par with the primordial Hong Meng tree? Those were truly great existences. Senior. Before Zhuowen could finish, Hong Meng interrupted, "I know what you want to say. You want me to save the primordial star system and the primordial star system, and you think that I am on the same level as the primordial Hong Meng tree, right?" Zhuowen was stunned for a moment before he nodded. He was quite shocked. It seemed that this old man could see through his heart. "I am just an ordinary old man with a long lifespan. The only reason I am still alive is because of the primordial Hong Meng tree. I can only interfere with the things inside the primordial Hong Meng tree. As for the things outside, I can't interfere at all." Hong Meng glanced at Zhuowen indifferently and put away the fishing rod. Zhuowen realized that the fishing line at the end of the fishing rod had no hook. It was empty. "Then, you deliberately released the demon infant?" Zhuowen asked with a gloomy expression. Hong Meng raised his head and looked straight at Zhuowen. He said seriously, "Yes, I did it." "But?" Zhuowen asked in a low voice. "The demon infant was nurtured by the primordial Hong Meng tree for countless years. Its purpose was to bring you, someone who has been acknowledged by the primordial Hong Meng tree, into the river of time in the primordial Hong Meng tree space. You asked me why, and I can only say that everything is predestined." Hong Meng said indifferently. Zhuowen said excitedly, "Destiny? I think this is just an excuse you came up with. Do you know how many lives have been lost because of your actions?" Hong Meng sighed softly, "Of course I know. That's why I appeared in front of you. I won't fight back. You can kill me immediately. It can be considered as me forgiving you for this. But you still have a mission. Only you have the opportunity to defeat the heavenly demon king. As for the other two chosen ones, they are just a cover to buy time for you." Zhuowen's brows were tightly knitted together. He was gradually unable to understand what Hong Meng was saying. "I need a reason that can convince me," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Hong Meng looked at Zhuowen, who had regained his composure, and nodded inwardly. With a wave of his sleeve, the door to the wooden hut automatically opened. "Come in for a chat." Hong Meng smiled and took the lead to enter the wooden house. Zhuowen followed closely behind. Inside the wooden house, the decorations were rather simple. There was only a wooden table, 2 wooden stools, and a rather shabby wooden bed. "Have a seat." Hong Meng called out to Zhuowen and brewed 2 cups of tea, placing them in front of Zhuowen and himself. Zhuowen looked deeply at Hong Meng and said indifferently, "You should tell me the reason why you did that." Hong Meng took a sip of tea and said in a rather heavy tone, "When you first entered the primordial Hong Meng tree space, the words you heard have actually explained the reason why I did what I did. The Tao of heaven is to take away the surplus and make up for the deficiency. The Tao of man is different. Who can take care of the world with surplus? Only Taoists." Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and muttered the words he had heard when he first entered the space. "It is precisely this sentence. The Tao of heaven and the Tao of man are different. The Tao of man can refer to countless living beings, including the human race, foreign races, primordial god race, and so on. As long as they are living beings, they will continue to reproduce and increase in numbers. After increasing in numbers, there will be disputes, and they will be disputes all year round. If it is a small fight, it is naturally harmless. But once it becomes a terrifying war, and this kind of war has broken the original order and balance, What do you think will happen? Hongmeng's sharp eyes looked at Zhuowen as he questioned coldly. Zhuowen's pupils shrank and he said, "It will become chaotic. When order and balance are broken, it will fall into a state of chaos." The primordial star system was already in such a state back then. The constellation gods divided their own regions and began to conquer each other. Years of war. Moreover, in order to consolidate their divine authority, the four chiefs even reached into the chaotic starry sky. If the situation continues to develop, countless living beings in the chaotic starry sky will be destroyed. Even the starry sky fruits in the primordial Hongmeng tree will suffer. Therefore, balance is the most eternal and unchanging law in this world. Once balance is lost, everything will develop in the direction of losing control. The primordial gods back then were already blinded by their desire for power. They started to lose control, destroy the balance, and trample on order. Jun thought for a moment, and then he said solemnly, "So the primordial Hongmeng tree gave birth to the demon infant and wanted to use it to control the balance? But you are wrong. After the demon infant became the heavenly demon king, it broke the balance again. Everything returned to the way it was before, and it was even worse than before. It even caused the deaths of so many innocent lives." Hongmeng shook his head and he said, "No. Everything is on the right track. As the saying goes, there can be no construction without destruction, and only after destruction can there be construction. If we want this starry sky to develop in a long-term and peaceful manner, we can only maintain the balance. The demon infant is only restraining the primordial gods and accelerating the destruction of the balance. The one to maintain the balance isn't the demon infant, but you. Jun, you are the one maintaining order, and the new balance will be maintained by you. And I also believe that you can do all of this." Jun was stunned. He didn't expect that Hongmeng had calculated all of this. However, when he thought of what he had seen and heard in the primordial star system, Zhuowen's heart was still filled with anger. The demon infant's methods were too extreme. However, Jun was powerless because he couldn't change anything. If you feel angry, then that's right. Then accept the inheritance that I'm going to give you and change all of this. Use the tenacity in your heart, your anger, and your impulse to change it." Hongmeng muttered softly. He stretched out his skinny right hand and pointed at Zhuowen's glabella. Zhuowen subconsciously wanted to dodge, but he found that his body couldn't move. He could only watch as Hongmeng's right hand pointed at his glabella. A torrent of information flowed into Zhuowen's mind. Along with this terrifying information, there was also a strange and mysterious power that flowed into his mind and body. Chapter 48-44. Zhuowen seemed to have experienced a very long time while he was receiving the information. From the beginning of the world to the present day, countless years later, he had experienced all kinds of things in the world. At the same time, he had also learned endless knowledge and power. When Zhuowen reopened his eyes, his aura remained the same, but the look in his eyes had completely changed. They had become different. They had become sharp and unadorned, ancient and unadorned. "You are indeed the one chosen by the primordial Hong tree. You can accept my inheritance without any flaws." Hongmeng was still sitting opposite Zhuowen. There was a faint smile on his face, but it was pale and weak. Hongmeng had become extremely weak. His face was pale and his eyes were dull. His originally youthful face was full of wrinkles, like the wrinkled bark of an old tree. In particular, Hongmeng's aura was extremely weak at the moment. Moreover, it revealed traces of death aura, like the setting sun in the west. "Senior Hongmeng?" Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. He looked deeply at the old man and said softly, "Jun, I have passed on my life's experience to you, including how to accept the true inheritance of the primordial Hong tree. I hope you can forgive me and truly maintain the order of this space." Hongmeng's aura became weaker and weaker. The death aura in his eyes became more and more intense, but the corners of his mouth curved into a relaxed smile. "Actually, you are right to question me. From the moment the three ultimate essences gave birth to living beings, I was already there. I personally witnessed the birth, development, and even decline of countless living beings. They are all like children that I have watched grow up. How can there be parents in this world who don't love their children? I love them too, but I hope that they can develop healthily. I know very well. The loss of balance is bound to cause great chaos, and it will be an uncontrollable chaos. When that time comes, even the three ultimate origins will not be able to save them. In order for them to develop healthily, I can only reluctantly give up what I love. In order to achieve the ultimate balance, there must be sacrifices. In this world, ideals are always beautiful, but how can there be so many ideals in this world? I'm willing to bear this crime for countless years, be spurned by others, and die alone. I don't want to see them completely destroyed in front of me. In the end, the entire starry sky will become deathly silent without any vitality. That's worse than death. Hong Meng spoke slowly. Perhaps he knew that he didn't have long to live, so he spoke everything that was in his heart. Dun. Remember, what I've imparted to you is my countless years of experience. I've also told you that I'm just a servant of the primordial Hong tree and I don't have much power. I can only borrow the power of the primordial Hong tree. But you are different. You can accept his legacy and exercise the rights of the keeper of order on his behalf. However, you must maintain order. If you obtain the inheritance but do not complete your mission, you will suffer a backlash from the origin energy. You will die a very miserable death. Remember, do not go against the order. Hong Meng raised his head and stared straight at Zhuan, reminding him in a cautious tone. Zhuan nodded slowly and said, I understand. Senior Hong Meng. Me. My mission is over, so I'm useless to the primordial Hong tree. I hope you can really treat all the living beings in the starry sky well. Don't favor one and discriminate against another. Otherwise, the future will also be imbalanced. The fate of the primordial divine king is a tragic example. It's time for me to leave. I hope you can do a good job and protect this starry sky. Hong Meng smiled brightly at Zhuan, and countless specks of light emerged from his body. Finally, he collapsed and disappeared before Zhuan's eyes. Senior Hong Meng, have a safe journey. Zhuan muttered softly as he looked at the dissipating specks of light. A trace of sadness rose in his heart. He suddenly felt that he had been too rude to question Hong Meng just now. Hong Meng loved those living beings more than he or even the countless living beings in the chaotic starry sky. Throughout the countless years of time, he'd watched them grow and develop as if he was watching a child grow. So, how could he not have feelings for them? However, in order to save this starry sky, he had made such a decision on his own and carried the guilt for countless years. Now that his mission was over, he was free. Suddenly, the space gradually collapsed, and Zhuan continued to rise. The space became smaller and smaller in his eyes, and finally disappeared. The surrounding scenery flashed by rapidly, turning into many shadows around him. It was an extremely strange sight. In the end, Zhuan stopped. He found that he had returned to the purple forest, and in front of him was the purple gold sapling. And his right hand just so happened to land on the little purple gold sapling. It was as if what he had just experienced was just a dream, a very strange dream. However, Zhuan knew that it was not a dream. It was real. Is this the power of the essence source? I wonder what will happen if I absorb this energy and obtain the inheritance of the primordial Hong tree? Zhuan muttered to himself. His right hand grasped the tip of the sapling. Suddenly, the sapling turned into countless purple gold specks of light that merged into his palm. At the same time, the imprint of the sapling appeared on his palm, constantly flickering with light. At this moment, Zhuan felt as if his entire body was empty. His body felt light, as if there was an endless amount of energy in his body. Zhuan slowly sat down cross-legged, and his hands formed a complicated and strange seal. Suddenly, the shadow of the purple gold sapling appeared behind him. Although it was not big, it emitted a mysterious light. When the purple gold sapling appeared, the surrounding purple forest began to erupt with purple gold specks of light. They began to rapidly gather around the purple gold sapling. Moreover, the gathering speed became faster and faster. As time passed, The purple gold sapling slowly unfolded and grew. Cultivation knew no time. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. Time rapidly passed. As for Zhuowen, he was completely immersed in his cultivation. The purple gold sapling behind him grew larger and larger, growing from a sapling into a towering tree. Then from a tree to a massive tree, and in the end, it became a towering purple gold divine tree. Zhuowen's aura continued to strengthen and become vast. It was as if the purple gold divine tree behind him was not the purple gold divine tree, but an unprecedentedly huge world. While Zhuowen was cultivating crazily in the primordial Hong tree, the situation of the primordial star system had completely reversed. The last fortress of the primordial gods, Sacred Star City, was finally breached by the mighty heavenly demon army. The heavenly demon king did not participate in all of this. He just watched everything coldly from the sidelines, thinking about that fleeting glimpse back then. He seemed to have felt a gaze from the endless void. That gaze was too similar to the Zhuowen in his impression. It was almost exactly the same. My king, Sacred Star City has been breached. These are the heads of the 4 great chiefs. Please kindly accept them, my king. A stalwart figure came across the sky, knelt in front of the heavenly demon king, and said respectfully. The heavenly demon king looked down at the true demon in front of him and said, "Mo Shuji, you really didn't disappoint me. You were actually able to kill the 4 chiefs by yourself. Go to Sacred Star City. You can take whatever you want. I grant you this right." Chapter 48-45. Mo Suji lowered his head slightly and said, "Understood." After returning to Sacred Star City, have the heavenly demon army reorganize and lead the other true demons into the primal chaos starry sky. Occupy the primal chaos starry sky and put an end to this invasion. The heavenly demon king said with waning interest. Mo Suji raised his head and looked at the masked man in front of him. He saw weariness and listlessness in the other party's eyes, as if there was nothing in this world that could interest him in the slightest. "My king, what about you?" Mo Suji asked out of curiosity, but he quickly realized that he had lost his composure and hurriedly lowered his head, not daring to say another word. "I'm going to continue looking for the person I'm looking for." The heavenly demon king turned to look at the void behind him. His voice was still cold, but Mo Suji could hear some complicated emotions in his voice. "Why do you insist on looking for that person?" Mo Suji thought for a moment and asked. He knew that the heavenly demon king had been looking for a person all this time. He did not know the name of this person, nor did he know the exact origin. He only knew that the heavenly demon king had been looking for this person for countless years without success. The heavenly demon king was silent for a long time before he shook his head and said, "I also don't know why I have to look for him. I just want to find him. This obsession is very strange, very strange." Mo Suji was puzzled. He did not understand the heavenly demon king's answer at all. "Go. I've already given you the authority. The countless heavenly demons in Sacred Star City will be under your command." The heavenly demon king's calm voice slowly sounded, and then his figure slowly disappeared in front of Mo Suji. "Farewell, my king." Mo Suji placed his right hand on his left chest and lowered his head respectfully. After confirming that the heavenly demon king had left, Mo Suji stood up. His eyes were filled with determination as he muttered to himself, "Lord Ojua, I will also find you. Even if you're not in Sacred Star City, I will still rush into the primal chaos starry sky to find you." After saying that, Mo Suji turned into a black streak and rushed into Sacred Star City. Abyss Realm, inside the core palace. Zhu Huang slowly opened his eyes from his seclusion, and an invisible dragon roar resounded from his body. The immeasurable calamity's deadline is almost here. Zhu Huang muttered to himself as his gaze landed on the figure sitting in front of him. The one sitting in front of Zhu Huang was the Abyss Lord. He opened his eyes and exchanged glances with Zhu Huang. They both saw a hint of caution in each other's eyes. For the past 900 years, Zhu Huang and the Abyss Master had been studying the immemorial cultivation method and the method to reach the immemorial realm that Zhuowen had passed on to them. The two of them achieved great results, both stepping into the archaic realm. However, when they stepped into the primeval realm for a few years, they understood the divisions of the primeval realm. The immemorial realm was the ultimate realm that reigned supreme over all false realms. It was divided into small success, large success, and perfection. Zhu Huang and the Abyss Master had used these 900 years to successfully step into the initial stage of the archaic realm. They could clearly sense that after stepping into the primeval stage, the total amount of their power had not changed, but the nature of their power had completely changed. For example, if their divine power in the past was like cotton, then it was like lead now. Cotton and lead had the same volume, but their nature was completely different. Lead was far heavier than cotton. Comparing their current divine power to their previous divine power was like comparing cotton to lead. Zhu Huang felt this the most clearly. After all, he had been a high-rank immemorial god in his previous life. He had only discovered the true strength of the immemorial realm after automatically entering it. Although he was only at the initial stage of the immemorial realm, he could sense that the immemorial realm was probably stronger than most constellation gods, perhaps even comparable to the four paragons. Senior Zhu Huang, do you think we can withstand the immeasurable calamity with our current strength? The Abyss Master asked Zhu Huang. He knew that Zhu Huang came from the immemorial star system and had a deeper understanding of the immeasurable calamity than he did. With our current strength, it won't be difficult to withstand the immeasurable calamity. Zhu Huang smiled. The Abyss Master sighed in relief. Suddenly, a sonorous voice sounded in the minds of the Abyss Master and Zhu Huang. Fellow Taoists, congratulations on successfully entering the immemorial realm. I've calculated the time, and the immeasurable calamity should descend today. Can the two of you come to the immemorial Heavenly Tao Academy for a chat? Zhu Huang and the Abyss Master looked at each other and immediately recognized the owner of this figure. Wasn't it Forefather Tianzhu? Of course. Zhu Huang smiled and waved his sleeve. The void in front of him split open, and he stepped into the depths of the spatial rift with the Abyss Master. Far away in the depths of the immemorial Heavenly Tao Academy, Forefather Tianzhu sat behind layers of curtains. He was not surprised to see a Tao Kong spatial rift appear in front of him. The immemorial realm had completely surpassed the great carefree realm. They could travel through the chaotic stars at will and arrive anywhere in the blink of an eye. Zhu Huang and the Abyss Master walked out of the spatial rift and cupped their hands to Forefather Tianzhu behind the curtains. The two of you. This old man has calculated the immeasurable calamity. In 6 hours, the immeasurable calamity will descend. How about you come with me to the stars above the 100 territories and wait? This old man has prepared wine. Forefather Tianzhu smiled. Then I'll have to trouble Lord Tianzhu. The Abyss Master cupped his hands. Forefather Tianzhu waved his hand and said, now that Zhuo Xiaoyu hasn't returned yet, only the three of us have the ability to resist the immeasurable calamity. Why are you being so polite with me? With that, Forefather Tianzhu waved his sleeve, and the three of them disappeared from the depths of the palace and appeared in the stars above the 100 territories. There was a white jade pavilion on top of a floating cloud. Inside the pavilion, there were tables and chairs. On the table that was as white as jade, the corresponding wine had already been prepared. Fellow Taoists, please have a seat. Forefather Tianzhu personally poured 2 cups of wine and sat down, while Zhu Huang and the Abyss Master sat opposite him. Senior Zhu Huang, can you tell us about the immemorial star system and the immeasurable calamity? Forefather Tianzhu looked at Zhu Huang and asked curiously. Well, I'll have a good chat with you today and then wait for the immeasurable calamity. However, the immeasurable calamity is just an appetizer. The real calamity and terror are still to come. Zhu Huang smiled in a carefree manner. He drained the cup of wine in one gulp and began to narrate the story. Forefather Tianzhu and the Abyss Master listened very seriously, as if they were intoxicated. It was as if they were immersed in Zhu Huang's story, which was sad, happy, angry, and sorrowful. Suddenly, a terrifying aura came from the depths of the starry sky, sweeping over like a tide. Zhu Huang's voice came to an abrupt stop. He looked up at the depths of the starry sky and muttered softly, "The immeasurable calamity is coming." Chapter 48-46. Boom, boom, boom. Terrifying dark clouds surged from the depths of the starry sky. The dark clouds were so huge that they almost covered the entire starry sky. In the blink of an eye, the starry sky around the 100 domains was completely covered by the dark clouds, and the entire world fell into a deathly darkness. The countless stars in the starry sky disappeared, and the countless glowing treasures in the 100 domains also lost their effect. Darkness. A pitch-black darkness that even divine sense couldn't penetrate swept over and drowned countless living beings in the 100 domains. What was even more terrifying was that there were layers of terrifying tribulation energy brewing in the dark clouds. The moment they sensed the tribulation energy, everyone's expression changed, and they trembled with despair in their eyes. Immeasurable tribulation. It's the immeasurable tribulation. How can it be so terrifying? It's far beyond all the tribulations we've experienced. What the hell is this? Why is this darkness so strange? And I can't seem to use the power in my body, as if I've lost my divine power. We're finished. We're completely finished. We're dead meat. In the 100 domains, countless creatures looked up at the sky, but all they saw was darkness. They could not see what was above them. However, they could deeply feel the terrifying aura of the tribulation. It was so terrifying that it was as if it was going to tear them into pieces. Hundreds of years ago, the Abyss domain had already announced the news of the immeasurable tribulation to the 100 domains. Many creatures did not believe it, and some even disdained it. But now, after the immeasurable tribulation had truly descended, all creatures were afraid and felt the taste of despair. What a terrifying aura! Is this the immeasurable tribulation? Ancestor Tianju and the Abyss Master looked solemn. They slowly stood up and looked at the endless dark clouds around them. Only Zhu Huang was a little calmer, but his expression was still quite solemn. Both of you were no longer afraid of the immeasurable tribulation, but it can completely destroy the 100 domains. What we need to do is not to avoid the immeasurable tribulation, but to fight it head-on and completely stop it from harming the 100 domains. Zhu Huang said seriously. Ancestor Tianju and the Abyss Master both nodded solemnly. The immeasurable tribulation is about to descend, and the first wave of it. Make your move. After Zhu Huang finished speaking, he let out a shocking dragon roar. Immediately, his body emitted a blazing golden light. In the end, he transformed into an enormous golden dragon. This giant golden dragon was covered in countless golden dragon scales that were as hot as the sun, but its head was a human face with 2 long dragon horns on its forehead. The golden light that erupted from the dragon horns was far more intense and dazzling than the dragon scales. The moment Zhu Huang revealed his true form, Forefather Tianju and the Abyss Master were not to be outdone. They charged in 2 other directions and formed a triangle with Zhu Huang, completely protecting the 100 realms behind them. Was that light? Those were 3 figures, cultivators who were far more powerful than us. They stepped forward bravely. Countless living beings in the 100 outer territories raised their heads and looked at the 3 blazing figures in the distance. They could not see the faces of Zhu Huang and the other 2, but they could feel how resplendent and dazzling the light they released was. In the 100 outer territories that had fallen into endless darkness, the light of these 3 people completely illuminated all the areas of the 100 outer territories, gradually calming down the panicked hearts of many living beings. Rumble. Suddenly, the terrifying black clouds that enveloped the 100 outer territories finally sent down the first wave of tribulation. Endless black thunderbolts swept over from all directions. The moment these black thunderbolts appeared, they turned into the shape of terrifying strange beasts and crazily pounced on Zhu Huang, Forefather Tianju, and the Abyss Master. "Pumph! Die for me?" Zhu Huang snorted coldly. Blazing golden flames spurted out from his dragon horns, directly annihilating and piercing through the strange beasts. The Lord of the Deep Abyss and Ancestor Tianju also used their own methods to easily destroy the calamities around them. Was the immeasurable tribulation so weak? The Abyss Master was stunned. Forefather Tianju also revealed a strange expression. They had been anxious about the immeasurable tribulation for countless years, but now that they were facing it, they could easily block it. It's not that the immeasurable tribulation is weak, but that we've become strong enough now. The immemorial realm is far more powerful than we imagined, surpassing all false realms. In the end, the immeasurable tribulation is only a tribulation created by the four paragons. With our current strength, not only do we not fear the four paragons, we can even defeat them. This immeasurable tribulation created by them is naturally not much of a threat to us. Zhu Huang said indifferently. The second wave of tribulation is coming, the Abyss Master suddenly said. Zhu Huang and Forefather Tianju looked up. Sure enough, the black clouds around them were beginning to brew a new tribulation. Woo-woo. All of a sudden, black palaces appeared in the surroundings. Inside each palace sat a majestic and terrifying figure, and in front of the palaces were thousands of soldiers and horses. Kill, kill, kill. Suddenly, the thousands of troops in front of the black palaces launched an unprecedented charge and began to madly charge toward Zhu Huang and the other two paragons. The number of troops was too terrifying, and their power was much stronger than the first wave of tribulation. Zhu Huang, Forefather Tianju, and the Abyss Master did not retreat. Instead, they charged into the enemy army and began to madly slaughter the endless tide of soldiers. They were too strong, and the thousands of troops were as fragile as paper in front of them. They arrived in the palaces in the blink of an eye and blasted out with their palms. The majestic figures sitting in the palaces wanted to resist, but they were easily suppressed. Even the palaces were blasted to pieces. After the second wave of tribulation was dealt with, the third wave came, the fourth wave, the fifth wave, wave after wave of tribulation came, each more terrifying than the last, but they were all easily dealt with by the three paragons. The countless beings in the 100 territories outside were originally worried for Zhu Huang and the other two paragons, but they were completely numb after seeing the three of them almost single-handedly oppressing the immeasurable tribulation. Of course, there were naturally people with good eyesight in the 100 territories outside. Many people had already recognized two of the three paragons. They were Forefather Tianju and the Abyss Master. However, Zhu Huang was too unfamiliar to them, so they did not recognize him. The Abyss Master had become so strong. The immeasurable tribulation was as fragile as paper in front of him. In the Abyss realm, Divine Lord Danjin by Shuyuan and the other higher-ups looked up and stared at the back of the Abyss Master, their eyes full of surprise. As expected of the Dean, he was really powerful. He could easily deal with such a terrifying tribulation as the immeasurable tribulation. In the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy, sage masters walked out of their cave abodes and looked up at Forefather Tianju's back. They were all amazed and full of admiration. However, among the 9 sage masters, Yuanxing only glanced at Forefather Tianju's back after walking out of his cave abode before quietly leaving the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy. Chapter 48-47. The immeasurable calamity was still ongoing, but the countless living beings in the 100 domains had gradually calmed down. Although the immeasurable calamity was terrifying, they also realized that Zhu Huang and the other two were more powerful. It was only a matter of time before the immeasurable calamity was resolved. While Zhu Huang, the Abyss Master, and Ancestor Tianju were fighting against the immeasurable calamity, Master Ji Yuanxing had already left the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy and arrived at the entrance of the death prison. The entrance of the death prison was a huge black hole crack. It was cold, dark, and filled with the smell of death. Master Ji Yuanxing's eyes flickered. After thinking for a while, he took out the communication jade talisman and looked at the message. The appointed time was almost up. The 99th level of the death prison is completely dark. It's impossible to break through. My disciple said that he can leave at any time. Is that true? However, the time is almost up. If my disciple really appears, it means that his current strength. Speaking of this, Master Ji Yuanxing's eyes were filled with excitement. Sakyamuni was his proudest disciple. Moreover, he firmly believed that Sakyamuni was the true heaven's chosen one of the 100 domains. However, ancestor Tianzhu, Zhu Huang, and the Abyss Master's cultivation had reached a certain level. After seeing them resist the immeasurable calamity so easily, his heart began to waver. He naturally knew Zhu Huang's background. Zhuan had brought him from the Archean stars. Both the Abyss Master and ancestor Tianzhu had been taught some kind of cultivation technique by Zhuan. In the past 900 years, they had suddenly advanced by leaps and bounds and reached a level that even he couldn't see through at all. The outside world had always said that the true heaven's chosen one was Zhuan. He naturally didn't believe it at first. However, after seeing Zhu Huang, ancestor Tianzhu, and the Abyss Master's transformation, he gradually began to doubt his judgment. But now, his hope was reignited. Sakyamuni could break through the 99th level of the death prison, which meant that his strength was also beyond his expectations. Suddenly, the sound of strong wind came from the depths of the black hole. Master Ji Yuanxing saw a huge bird rushing out. The giant bird had 3 heads, and it looked like a crow. Its 3 pairs of eyes contained a strange gray smoke, and the aura it emitted was especially frightening. Death Prison's administrator, hey! The moment Master Yuanxing saw this 3-headed giant bird, he immediately recognized the latter's identity. This was a truly terrifying giant beast. Its strength far exceeded the 9 great Saint Masters. It was a supreme expert second only to old ancestor Tianzhu. However, Master Yuanxing didn't expect that Tao Wu, who had been staying in the death prison, would actually leave the death prison on his own. Wasn't he restrained in the death prison by Patriarch Tianzhu? But when he saw the golden and imposing figure on Swanni's back, the doubts in his heart were completely dispelled. This imposing golden figure was none other than Sakyamuni. At this moment, Sakyamuni was standing on Swanni's back. His eyes were filled with disdain, as if he was the only sovereign in the world and no one could defeat him. So strong. I can't see through him anymore. Master Yuanxing looked up at the godlike Sakyamuni on Swanni's back. His eyes were filled with a complicated expression. Back then, when he had just accepted Sakyamuni, the latter was only a weakling who had just entered the great carefree realm. He didn't expect that in just a few years, his disciple had already grown into a supreme expert that he couldn't see through at all. Especially when Sakyamuni was actually standing on Swanni's back, and the ancient beast Swanni had a natural expression. He understood that Swanni had been completely subdued by Sakyamuni. Master! Swanni landed in front of Master Yuanxing. Sakyamuni jumped down and landed in front of Master Yuanxing. He knelt on one knee and said respectfully. Master Yuanxing's gaze was complicated. He hurriedly helped Sakyamuni up and said, "Sure, you are already so powerful. As your master, I am far inferior to you. Now, I don't have the qualifications to be called master by you. You can call me by my name directly." Sakyamuni looked deeply at Master Yuanxing. Seeing the calmness in the latter's eyes, he shook his head and said seriously, "A teacher for a day is a father for life. A master is a master. How can I call him by his name just because I'm stronger than him? Isn't that disregarding the difference in seniority?" Sakyamuni paused and said with a complicated expression, "Master. Although I, Sakyamuni, have had several masters, most of them had their own purposes. Only you are truly selfless to me. Therefore, I only have one master, and that is you." With that, Sakyamuni knelt again and solemnly bowed to Master Yuanxing. Master Yuanxing was startled. Immediately, his gaze showed that he was moved, but he quickly concealed it and nodded, "Good. Good." Master didn't accept the wrong disciple. "Come and greet my master." Sakyamuni glanced at Swanni behind him. Swanni roared and also knelt down, solemnly bowing to Master Yuanxing. Over the years in the death prison, he had truly felt Sakyamuni's strength and obtained real benefits. Now, he had stepped into the true immemorial realm. All of this was given to him by Sakyamuni. Therefore, he was now completely obedient to Sakyamuni and had completely become Sakyamuni's loyal mount. "Master, I specially left this inheritance for you. With this inheritance, you will comprehend the true immemorial realm." At that time, you will surpass most immemorial gods. Sakyamuni tapped his forehead with his right hand, took out a resplendent ball of light, and sent it into Master Yuanxing's forehead. The moment Master Yuanxing received the inheritance, he closed his eyes and began to silently accept it. When Master Yuanxing opened his eyes again, his gaze was different, and his temperament seemed to have undergone a metamorphosis. So that's how it is. Is this the immemorial realm? It's really amazing. With this inheritance, I will be able to reach this realm in less than a few hundred years. Master Yuanxing's eyes flashed with excitement. The inheritance Sakyamuni gave him clearly described the cultivation methods and various experiences of the immemorial realm. After inheriting these cultivation methods and experiences, he suddenly realized that as long as he was given time, breaking through to the immemorial realm would not be a problem. The path of cultivation was like this. As long as the direction was right and with the experience of predecessors, cultivation speed would only be twice the result with half the effort. Master, is that the immeasurable calamity? And those three are the Abyss Master and Ancestor Tianju. Who's the other one? Sakyamuni raised his head and looked at the terrifying black clouds that filled the entire 100 territories, as well as Zhu Huang, Ancestor Tianju, and the Abyss Master who were fighting against the black clouds. He knew Ancestor Tianju and the Abyss Master, but he had never seen Zhu Huang. The other one is Zhu Huang. Zhuan brought him back from the immemorial star system. He's from the Dragon Clan. Master Yuanxing gave a brief introduction of Zhu Huang's origins. Hearing this, Sakyamuni's eyes lit up. So that's how it is. Zhuan actually taught the Abyss Master and the others about the cultivation methods of the immemorial realm. In other words, he also obtained one of the 3 ultimate essences? Interesting, very interesting. At this point, Sakyamuni's eyes were as cold as the sky, and a strong killing intent soared into the sky, dispersing most of the black clouds around the 100 territories. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.